Oh, how can you not?
And then I said, no, I can't afford coach.
Pretty bad when it's.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the Natural Resources Board here at the Oneida Convention Center in Green Bay, our June 26th meeting. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our great nation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll now call our hybrid meeting of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board to order. I've got a few administrative reminders to go through first, so please be patient. Everyone, please turn off phones or other devices that might interrupt the meeting and try and keep the background noise down to a minimum. Our meetings are televised live via YouTube, and we may have some presenters on Zoom on some of the agenda items. We welcome and thank all viewers for tuning in, and records of our past meetings are available for review on the DNR website under the Natural Resources Board Briefs of Action. Direct public involvement and open, transparent meetings are the foundation for how this board has operated for over 50 years and how we strive to operate today. Our Natural Resources Board discussions and decision-making are transparent to all, and most importantly, public testimony is welcome at every regularly scheduled Natural Resource Board meeting. To ensure fair and equal time for all, we limit presenters to 3 minutes. We've got our little light system here that's green for go, and when you get near your 3-minute mark, the yellow light will come on and then the red, and we'll ask you to pull your comments together in closing at the 3-minute point. I also want to remind speakers that you can augment your verbal remarks with written materials. A lot of times people want to provide a lot more information than they can possibly talk about in 3 minutes, and we welcome written materials in conjunction with your testimony. We've got a couple of thank yous to do and also comment a little bit about our visit here. Normally we meet in Madison, and we make an effort to take our meeting out to the public during some of the summer months. That's the reason we're here in Green Bay. Very important to provide access to the public, to the board and the proceedings, but it's equally important for the board to get out and get a firsthand view of the resources, an opportunity to learn from the insights of our conservation partners, and to interact with staff in the field on many of the issues that we have an opportunity to weigh in on at some point in the coming months. So the simple statement is the board learns an awful lot from these trips, and they're very valuable for us as well. And I want to put out a special thank you to the staff involved in putting together the tour yesterday. We were out and stopped at a couple of different places in the Green Bay area to take a look at conservation issues, stewardship of some land, some fisheries issues. And the afternoon we spent at New Water at the wastewater treatment plant here in Green Bay that handles the waste for a number of the local municipalities. A very complex and a very impressive operation. And I think the most important thing, I should also mention, as well as thanking the staff for the tour, I want to extend a thank you to Tom Sigmund, the executive director at New Water, and his staff. They were extremely welcoming, and we went on a very detailed tour right into the bowels of the wastewater treatment system. It's the most comprehensive tour I've ever been on in my whole career, and I appreciated it very much. We learned a lot. But I think the most important thing that we saw yesterday was the respect and the constructive working relationship between the staff at New Water, department staff that serve the public and work with New Water to get good results. They have an excellent working relationship, and that's what we all strive for, and I can't say enough about it. A special thanks to Kyle Burton and Natasha Gwint for heading up the tour, and for all of the staff that worked with you to support our day in the field yesterday. As I said, it was very informative. I also want to mention a special thanks to the Oneida Nation for hosting us here at the United Convention Center. That's a first-class facility with first-class staff and very, very nice hospitality. I have a couple of other thank yous. One to Deputy Secretary Stephen Little and your leadership team at the department for their support of this board and the commitment to enhance collaboration between the department, the board, and the citizens that we all serve. And a special thanks to our issue presenters, DNR, Information Technology, Office of Communications, General Counsel, and all the staff who make these meetings possible. It's an extra heavy lift to bring the board out of Madison to these meetings around the state to make all of the connections for communications and broadcast and the logistics of getting people and equipment and issues here. So I want to emphasize that with a very special thank you for that extra effort. I also want to take time to individually recognize Ashley Bistall. Ashley is our liaison to the Natural Resources Board for the department and provides outstanding support. And I want to issue public congratulations to Ashley. This is her last meeting for a while. She's going off on a maternity leave and working on a higher priority project. So we're going to miss Ashley for the next few months. We've got very competent staff that'll be filling in for her, and for the public, you can reach the liaison using the same numbers and the same emails. You just may hear a different voice at the end of the phone. or somebody else responding to your messages. Ashley, we wish you the very best and look forward to seeing you and your expanded family. I also want to recognize Kari Lee Zimmerman. A special part of this meeting this month is our annual get-together with Wisconsin Conservation Congress. Rob Bowman and his District Leadership Council are here, and part of our agenda is to review the spring hearing results. In doing that, we take the opportunity to get together in the evening on purely a social event. We don't talk business. We talk a little hunting and fishing and family, but no business. It's strictly a chance to get together with the leadership of the Congress and the board and the department. We've got a lot of new faces, and it's a great chance to break the ice and get to know people, to build and maintain those positive working relationships. And Rob, we very much appreciate your time and the time of your team to spend time last night with the board. And Kari, special thanks to you for the great support you give to the Congress and making that link between department, board, and Congress. Thank you. And lastly, I want to thank all of the employees of the department, the citizen volunteers, and all of our conservation partners for your continued and tireless work to protect and enhance our natural resources and to serve all the citizens of our great state. Board members, any questions or comments before we get rolling? Okay, thank you. Ashley, please call the roll.
Present.
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 Present. Present. Present.
Present. We have a quorum. Our next item on the agenda is a couple of introductions. Deputy Secretary Lil, would you take the lead on this, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning from Green Bay. Good morning from the Oneida Conference and Convention Center. It is my distinct honor to introduce to you Chairman Tahasi Hill, Chair of the Oneida Nation. Prior to his role as Chairman of the Oneida Nation, Chairman Hill served 2 terms on the Oneida Business Committee Council as a member for the Oneida Business Committee, which is the elected government official body for the Oneida Nation. Through his service as an elected leader, Chairman Hill has demonstrated a commitment to the preservation of the environment, to Oneida language and culture, and to the traditions and wisdom of sustainability, while working to exercise and protect the Oneida Nation's sovereignty. These are the guiding principles that drive his work with the Oneida Nation and beyond. It is my pleasure to introduce to the Natural Resources Board, Chairman Tahasi Hill.
Suguli Swagweka de Hasidaze Nyungets, Mogescle Wage, Nugitaloda, Onyotaga, Niwagunjiota. Greetings, everyone. I'm Dehasa Hill, Chairman for the Oneida Nation. As part of my introduction, I announced my clan, which is Bear, and I belong to the people of Standing Stone, also known as Oneida. So welcome to the board. Welcome to Oneida. And I always like to start off with a little bit of history. Oneidas are originally from upstate New York. We moved here during the 1820s and 30s, and thanks to the Menominee and the Ho-Chunk for welcoming us to their lands to help steward the next generations of Oneidas in this community. And so I always like to acknowledge that as well. And through the 200 plus years that we've been here, I think we've demonstrated great stewardship of the lands and the environment, as history can recount of the different federal Indian policies that affected tribes across the country and affected us all the same with the loss of land and the deforestation and things that all happened with that loss and control of that land. But as we were able to reacquire much of our reservation, I think at one point out of our 64,500 acre reservation, we were down to ownership of about 1,500 acres at one point. And so we were able to, over the last few decades, reacquire title to much of that land within our reservation boundaries. Now we're up to something close to 40%, 43% of the reservation. So about 29,000 acres or so. And with that comes the responsibility for that stewardship and responsibilities to the land and all of creation. And so we've done a lot of work with restoration projects, working with partners like the DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, UW Green Bay, and a lot of other partners, Pheasants Forever, and a lot of nonprofits like them, to be able to restore our lands and make sure that the natural environment is restored as much as possible. Obviously, we can't undevelop. So there's things that are constant in needs in our community as well for expansion, like, you know, housing and things like that, that we do our best to make sure that we evaluate the land to assure that people's basements don't flood from building in a wrong area or rising waters from the storms that are more frequent. So, you know, we really try to evaluate those natural systems to make sure that we're building in an appropriate space for the safety of our community. And so we really take great pride in our home here. And I hope you've had a great tour and were able to see, you know, maybe parts of the reservation. But I obviously would welcome anyone back for Oneida specific tour. We do have a great team that can bring you out to show a lot of the demonstration projects and the collaborative efforts that we've worked with partners in the area to, again, assure that we have a clean and safe environment. And so with that, I'd just like to welcome you to the Oneida Nation, the Oneida Reservation, and I hope you have a great meeting. You know, Yonko, thank you.
Chair Hill, thank you very much for your warm welcome and again for your hospitality. Thank you. We have a special guest here today that it's my honor to introduce, a longtime champion of good conservation, of rich and abundant resources and a clean environment. Senator Rob Coles is here today. And Senator, I'd like to offer the opportunity to make some remarks. Senator Coles spent time with us in the field yesterday during the field.
And I enjoyed
tour.
it. Thank you very much for letting me
Thank you for your
be
time.
part of
and
that.
interest.
Ask too many questions. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Steve. Tahasi, you've been a great steward of great leader for the tribe. And the tribe is a tremendous environmental leader in so many things that too many to mention. And we all should take a tour of all the great things that they've worked on. And some of that interacts with new water. Gosh, you folks have got really important positions. And two of you have been appointed. I'm sorry I won't be there in the future to help you move forward with your careers, but I'm optimistic that the talent that's here will get approved ultimately. So best wishes with the various issues that you're grappling with, complicated issues on air and water. I guess we all know that there's been tremendous progress. And, you know, we saw some of it yesterday, but more has to be done in air. You know, I found out yesterday from DNR staff that we've got backlogs in air permits, problem to grapple with. We've got to somehow come to a conclusion on the PFAS issue. There's obviously more things to do on climate, and you'll be involved in that. And I talked to Doug on the way in, Doug from the Menominee area, Menominee tribe, and they lost a whole bunch of timber. That's probably related to the climate mess, Doug, and we're not sure, but we suspect it might be. So you've got so many challenges. I wish you the best. I'll be following from the side rather than being right into the, you know, right into the vortex of the critical issues, but I'll be following you and looking forward to your success. Thanks for letting me make a few remarks. Best wishes to all of you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda, Secretary's remarks. Deputy Secretary Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the only thing that I would like to say right now is just to amplify the comments that you made at the beginning of the meeting. Just my personal thank you to the staff. It is a heavy lift to bring the NRB onto the road. It's an important function of what we do, but I just would not want to let this opportunity go to say a personal thank you for all the staff that put together such a great meeting and tour. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? We have one item on the agenda that we're gonna announce a change. Stephen, you want to cover that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you will look to your agenda, and we are going to item 6D. This is the overview of the DNR's boat safety program, wake boating briefing, and aquatic invasive species considerations. Due to circumstances that are unforeseen, very recent, and beyond our control, we are asking that we pull this agenda item from today's agenda and revisit it perhaps in the August meeting.
Okay, thank you. Other agenda changes? Additions, deletions? Robin, go ahead.
Is this the time to ask an item to be moved from the consent agenda, or is that when we get to that?
This is a good time to do that.
I would ask that item number 2B be removed from the consent agenda for a brief comment. I'd like to make.
Okay, so you're suggesting we move 2B from item 2 consent agenda and put it in item 3 that makes it open for discussion.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other changes? Marcy?
Mr. Chairman, I would appreciate moving item 2E to discussion in agenda 3.
Okay, item 2E, acknowledgement of a donation. Move to item 3 for further discussion. Any other changes? Okay, with that, let me go through and restate that. We're reordering a couple of items on the agenda. If there are no objections, I'll just pull that all together and ask for a motion to approve the amended agenda with the delay on item 6D, which is the overview of Wisconsin boating safety program, wake boat briefing, and aquatic invasive species considerations, to a subsequent board meeting. And also to reorder the agenda so that item 2B and item 2E will move into item 3, which allows discussion by the board.
I move for approval of the amended agenda.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Paul motion to approve, Patty seconds. Any discussion from the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Okay, we have an agenda. Next item is the consent agenda, and this would consist of the following items. Item 2A, which is approval of our brief of action from May 22, 2024 meeting. Item 2C, request the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for board orders WA-7-24E and WA-8-24 for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 500 and 520 to provide an alternative method for a municipality to establish proof of financial responsibility required for a solid waste disposal facility. Item 2D, acknowledgement of a donation from the Andrew F. Bell and Edith M. Bell Charitable Trust, donating $33,436.50. This donation will be used to provide $16,718.25 for continued support of endangered resources priorities, and will provide $16,718.25 to fund activities associated with wetland habitat. Also, item 2F, which is approval of a donation, requesting the board approves donation of $47,000 from the Rice Foundation to be used for the Office of Applied Science, research studying the responses of aquatic ecosystems to experimental manipulation of ice phenology. Request a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda.
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Got a motion to approve from Robin. Is there a second?
Second.
Doug seconds. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
Opposed, say no. Motion carried. Consent item passes. We'll move on to item 4, which is action items. Excuse me. We got to move on to item 3, which now has a couple of items in it. I should have written it in darker pencil. Okay, the first item is item 2B, now under 3. Item 2B is a request that the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for board order DG 0424 for proposed rules affecting chapter NR 809 related to updating lead and copper requirements for public drinking water in order to be consistent with revised federal requirements. And Caricature is the lead staff on that. And Robin, I think you wanted to make some remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, the board, for allowing me to just make a few comments. I think that this rule is one of the most important rules that we'll be looking at. It affects the health in particular of children under 6 years of age. Lead contamination of these children, lead exposure to these children can significantly decrease mental development, including learning, intelligence, behavior, and impulse control. I understand that lead in drinking water is not the only source of exposure that these children have, but it's an important part of the problem, and removing these lead from drinking water sources is really critical for helping ensure that the next generation comes through healthy and has the most advantages as they can have to be successful in life. So I just wanted to point out that this rule in particular is one that I think will impact many lives. I appreciate the work that the EPA and the State Drinking Water Program has done to make sure that they move as expeditiously as possible. And I look forward to seeing the results of the public hearing and the rule come forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you for joining us virtually. Really want to recognize your work and the staff you represent on this. Is there anything you'd like to add to that or say, as long as we're in discussion phase?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I just want to thank Robin for emphasizing the importance of this issue, both to the DNR and to the people of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Ann. Any further comments or questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2E. Acknowledgement of the donation. The Duke and Lisa Uline family.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It may be appropriate just to have a motion on this particular item, do them one at a time.
Thank you, Cheryl. You saved my life again.
I would move to approve item, is it now 3A?
Thank you. We got a motion to approve from Robin. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Paul. We have a second. And any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Now we'll move on to item 2F. Approve, excuse me, 2E. Acknowledgement of the donation. The Duke and Lisa Uline Family Foundation donated $100,000 to be used by the Bureau of Fisheries Management to study the interaction between northern pike and muskellunge, to better understand why muskellunge populations have declined in systems where northern pike have been introduced. Justine Haas is here, and Justine, would you give us a little background on this particular donation and research project?
Sure. Good morning, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and members of the board. I am Justine Haas, the Bureau Director for the Fisheries Management Program. So today, before you for your approval, you have a gift donation of $100,000 to help fund a research project. And the main goal of this research project is to describe the extent to which northern pike and muskie interact and compete, across time and space. And specifically, we want to focus on the spawning timing periods. There are historical studies that have looked at this in the past, but not to the detail that this study will do. There will be we'll begin using acoustic telemetry, where we're going to be able to put trackers in both the muskie and the northern pike. They're going to swim around together, and we're going to see where they intersect with each other, when they're on the same habitats, when they're feeding in the same areas, et cetera, to really try to understand this interaction. And this project was brought forward by the local Sawyer County fisheries biologist. He reached out to our Office of Applied Science research biologist located out of the Spooner office, and they were talking about this interaction as we are seeing locations where muskie have naturally occurred, and northern pike have been introduced, and we're seeing some changes to the muskie populations. And in the historical studies, we've seen that there are some interactions that could have negative impacts, but we really don't truly understand when those negative impacts are happening and how to control those. So they started talking about this, and they looked at the history, and they said, okay, let's look at a new project. Let's try and get really more in depth into this. And so that's how this sort of started. They then had to identify a water body for this, and they identified the spider chain in Sawyer County. This is a water body that historically has had a lot of research done on it specific to muskie. So we have a lot of background information. It has a naturally reproducing muskie population, and northern pike were not historically in this water body. Our first identification of northern pike in this system was in 2002. So it's got a relatively young northern pike population. In our more recent studies, in our more recent surveys that we've been doing out there has been a notice of a change in the muskie population, not significant, but a change, and that northern pike population is still increasing and growing. So they felt it was a really good water body to do this study on. So the county biologist, along with the research biologist, started talking with local groups and clubs about this project. And there were different ways they could do this project. There was sort of the cheap way where they weren't going to get as much detail as we really wanted. And then there was the expensive way of doing this, which we really didn't have the funds to do. So in talking with the local groups, there was a lot of excitement locally about learning about these interactions, and people really got on board. So along with the $100,000 donation that you guys are looking at to approve today, there has also been donations from about 45 other groups, individuals, and businesses that total $97,484. And in fact, at the next board meeting, you will be seeing on the consent agenda another large donation to this project of $50,000 from a different entity. So we're excited to have so many partners supporting this important research. Even though it's only going to be on one lake in this county, we believe this lake is very representative of naturally reproducing musky waters, so that we're going to be able to expand what we learned from this water across our musky waters across the state. So that's sort of the background of how we got here today, and how this is part of a donation of a larger project. So with that, I will take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Justine. Any questions from the board?
Just a comment of why I brought it off of the consent agenda. I just think it's so important to understand that this is a collaborative project, and that it is on a lake that has been researched previously and is the right choice for this study. So when I saw it on the agenda, I had to ask Justine more questions, and I thought it was interesting enough to pull out.
I was really impressed by some of the high technology that's going to be used on this research project, and the quality of the data is going to be a generation above what we've had in the past.
Yeah, we're going to literally be able to know exactly where on the lakes these fish were sitting. It's pretty crazy that we can do that now.
Any other
Paul, did you say you're going to go fishing there now? We won't give that out to the public.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Doug, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Just thanks to the Uline Family Foundation for the donation. Helps us study a pretty important resource.
Any other comments from the board or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, we need a motion first.
I'll move approval of this donation from the Uline
Thank you,
family.
Marcy.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion to approve, Doug has a second. Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
We have the most polite attorney in all of state government. We will keep her happy.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4, action items. Item 4A is a land exchange, Ferry Bluff State Natural Area in Sauk County. James Lemke, Real Estate Section Manager. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Good morning to Deputy Secretary Little and the members of the Natural Resources Board. My name is Jim Lemke. I am the Real Estate Section Manager for the department, and I'm excited to be here in Green Bay as well because this is my hometown. So welcome to Green Bay. Today is my pleasure to present 3 distinct but similar real estate asks, 2 being land exchanges and 1 being a land donation. The first ask today before you for your consideration involves exchanging 6 acres of department-owned lands for 8.4 acres from the Bender family, all located within the boundary of Ferry Bluff and Sauk County. Some of you may remember a few years back, we accepted a donation from Groundswell Conservancy, which included parts of the Bender property along the bluff top and a lower agricultural field. This potential exchange will complete department ownership of the remainder of the important Wisconsin River bluff, which rises 300 feet above the Wisconsin River itself, is forested with mature oak trees, and adjoins department property to the north and west. The property features one of only 3 recognized winter eagle roosts in the state of Wisconsin and includes 700 feet of shoreline along the Wisconsin River. The land will be open to all 5 nature-based outdoor activities. The department will be divesting of an older set of buildings on the 6 acres of ag ground as part of that original donation from Groundswell that was acquired with in that past donation. The 6 acres is no longer needed for conservation purposes due to the superior habitat and increased size and public use of the 8.4 acres exchanged parcel. As part of a survey, the department will retain ownership in the valley down to the town road for the public to easily access those portions of the property that are located below the bluff area in the valley. Stewardship funds will be used for the difference in value of $45,600, which was determined by appraisal and will be paid to the vendors at closing. And with that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask for this board's consideration on exchanging 6 acres of department lands no longer needed for conservation purposes for 8.4 acres of land owned by the Bender family for the exchange value difference of $45,600.
Thank you. Any questions of Jim?
I
Then
would
we
move approval.
probably need a motion. Robin moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Marcy seconds. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. You want to move on to the next item, 4B, another land exchange, White River Marsh Wildlife Area, Green Lake County. Jim Lemke, Real Estate Manager.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. This next real estate ask involves an exchange of properties with White River Farm LLC, exchanging 114.5 acres of land to the department for 9 acres of department-owned lands. The 114 acres are all within the boundary of the White River Marsh Wildlife Area. They block nicely with existing department ownership of lands to the north and to the west, and will also include a small parcel which will square off department owner, which is basically southeast of the larger portion of the acreages. All these lands will be open to all 5 nature-based outdoor activities, the MBOAs. The 9 acres the department will exchange are primarily uplands and will provide better access to White River Farm LLC off the adjoining County Highway DD. This allows the LLC to not rely on existing neighboring driveways and an easement to access continuing acreage that they own. The 9 acres is no longer needed for state's use for conservation, given more public opportunities and habitat advantages from receiving the 114 acres. Independent appraisers determined the value of the 114 acres to be $195,000, while department lands were valued at $57,000. White River Farm LLC has agreed to gift this difference to the department, making this an even value exchange, meaning no monies will be exchanged between the parties. The White River Marsh Wildlife Area is known for extensive wetlands, bogs, and flowages, providing important habitat, nesting, and migratory waterfowl for a variety of rare bird and waterfowl species, including the endangered whooping crane, reintroduced into the White River Marsh area in 1999, successfully reintroduced, I should add. Management of the property will be consistent with master plan objectives of Central Sand Hills. This plan is expected to come before the board within the next year. The local DNR property manager feels these 114 acres being primary wetland bogs won't require extensive property management. With that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask the board to approve this exchange, finding the 9-acre department lands are no longer needed for state's use for conservation in favor of the greater advantages of public ownership and access with the 114-acre parcel.
Thank you. Any questions of Jim? And we're ready for a motion, I
So
think.
move for approval.
Doug moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Deb? Deb seconds. Any discussion from the board?
I just would
Go
like
ahead,
to
Paul.
commend the real estate section for working with the public and making taking these puzzle pieces and making it better for private citizens and for the public. I commend him for his work.
Thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Move
Thank
on
you.
to item 4C, land donation, Upper Wolf River Fisheries Area, Langlade County.
Thank you again,
Again, Jim
Mr. Chair.
Lemke.
This next ask involves an 88-acre donation from the estate of Rose Wheeler for the Upper Wolf River Fishery Area. This acquisition comes to the department via a death deed recorded in 2013, but not to come to the department until notified by the estate's attorney in 2022. 48 acres are within project boundary, aligned nicely with existing department lands, can be accessed via a town road, by river, or through department-owned lands. The property features over 1/2 mile on the prestigious Wolf River, which is designated as a Wisconsin Outstanding Water Resource, which are waters that provide outstanding recreational opportunities, support valuable fisheries and wildlife habitat, and have good water quality. The Wolf River is a beautiful boulder-strewn river known for its recreational opportunities, with rapids and gradient drops making ideal for whitewater rafting, and that also feeds the whitewater rafting, and also supports canoeing and fishing in that area. You've probably noticed the Wolf River as you walk, run around this area, drive around it. There's quite a bit of it runs along the highway. A 40-acre parcel is also included in the donation, is north of the river and is not within project boundary. It's considered landlocked, but is accessible through Getchell Creek, which is a Class 1 trout stream that also feeds the Wolf River. This property is located within the North Central Forest Master Plan, which is a plan currently being worked on and will address the future uses of this 40-acre parcel. The estate also contains an older cabin, which will be removed by the department, and additional outbuildings. A phase 1 study was commissioned by the department, and that indicated no potential environmental liabilities. The property will be open to all 5 NBOAs, as in the other 2 asked today. With that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask the board's approval of the donation of 88 acres from the estate of Rose Wheeler, and that a certificate of appreciation be made as part of the official record of the Natural Resources Board.
Any questions of Jim? Marcy?
Thank you. Jim, as always, thanks for the briefings.
Sure.
It actually saves us time, I promise. The Upper Wolf River Fishery Area, just an awesome area. That landlocked piece, as we discussed, could pose some potential future issues. What are the options for the department in a situation like that?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Marcy, and I appreciate it and being able to put it on record. The master plan really takes a look at all different properties owned within that ecological landscape. And so they'll be looking at different options. It has public input and, of course, board input as well. But they could choose to offer that property for sale. They could choose to pull it within project boundary through the master plan process, which is something the board would have to prove. They could sell it to the neighbors. They could look for access to it from a neighboring property. There are a number of choices that I think the planners will take a close look at with regard to this 40-acre parcel.
Okay, thank you.
It's close, Marcy, just to add to the Wolf River, that creek. So, diehard hunters would probably walk up that creek just to access the 40 acres for hunting. So it will be open for the MBOAs too. And the neighbors will appreciate that because now, of course, they can utilize that 40 acres themselves as well.
Any other questions of Jim? And I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, Marcy moves approval, Patty seconds. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much. Okay, item 4D, request approval of the 2024 deer season recommendations. Jeff Fritzel, State Deer Program Specialist.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Deputy
Welcome, Jeff.
Secretary Stephen Little. Thank you. And members of the board, it's good to be back for our annual process of establishing the 2024 gun deer season, not gun deer season, all deer season recommendations that have been worked on over the past number of months with the department and the county deer advisory councils. Follow directions and make this at the right computer. Oh, there we go. Thank you. We are in the beginning of a new 3-year process where members, volunteers on the CDACs serve a 3-year period. We are initiating a new 3-year period in 2024. So we went through a process of having open applications. The majority of our CDAC members are returning veterans, so to speak. They've been on the CDAC, but we do have fresh faces on many of the CDACs that were going through it for the first time this year. And so as we do every year, we offered training sessions in person. We scattered them. We had 4 of them across the state so that we could meet with CDAC members earlier in the year and talk about the issues and help them, formulate their recommendations and opinions going into the actual CDAC meetings. And then prior to the meetings, we offer the public the opportunity to provide their input in an online survey. We've been doing that for years. And this year, again, we had, robust participation in that with over 9,000. It's not individuals because an individual person can submit a comment for multiple deer management units if they, hunt in multiple parts of the state. That breakdown of that public participation is shown in this slide, where the majority of the people are commenting on the deer management unit that they reside in. But there are, over almost 4,000 participants that are commenting in a deer management unit in another part of the state, not the unit that they reside in. We had over 400, non-Wisconsin residents participate in the survey. And most of them identify as deer hunters, private land owners, or participants on private land, and then the public land deer hunters, followed by participants that identified themselves as a landowner, and then other stakeholder groups as well that are reflected on the positions and representation on the county deer advisory councils. Another thing I'd like to highlight this year is we started this 2 years ago where we offered the opportunity, mostly in the farmland zones, for the CDACs to hold a joint meeting with a neighboring county. We had one pair of counties do that, Pepin and Dunn in 2023. And I think their experience sharing that, and they wanted to do it again. Several other pairs did that this year. The feedback from that was predominantly positive, mostly in the form of it was nice to have a little larger audience, share opinions and see what's happening on the other side of the fence. And the feedback I got, I think, from all of them is that, yeah, we would continue to do that. And maybe we'll see a little bit more of that in the future. Again, in the case of it is more applicable to the farmland zone counties. It ends up creating a meeting that is not unlike those counties that have two deer management units when they're split by a farmland and a forest deer management unit. The actual recommendations are provided to you in the background memo with all the details of the charge of the CDACs to recommend an antlerless harvest quota, the number of bonus antlerless permits to be associated to achieve that quota. And then in the farmland counties, the options for both free farmland permits and whether to participate in additional hunting opportunities with the holiday hunt and the January extension. The department is recommending that all of those recommendations from the CDACs be approved with one exception in that the Iowa County CDAC is recommending not to hold the January extension. The department is making a recommendation to add the January extension to Iowa County in consideration of the regionally in the state and the other counties in that part of the state participating in the January extension. This gives just the overall breakdown of the recommendations as it compared to previous years. We see that the antlerless quota statewide is down somewhat from last year, more similar to 2022. Most of that decrease happened in the northern forest zone, expectedly in terms of they're reducing their quota and permits about 25% from last year in consideration of the harvest we experienced up there in 2023. Again, so the bonus permits on private land, relatively consistent and similar over years. We see a drop in public land permits, again, returning to levels more similar to 2022. And then there are bonus permits made available in those counties that have metro subunits. So overall, again, you see the bonus permit availability declining somewhat from last year. And I'll just make a note that if people look at the quota harvest objective of 272,000 plus deer, but the permit level being lower than that, and how do you harvest that many deer with fewer permits? This table does not recognize the free farmland permits that are issued in the farmland zones, and the predominant deer harvest is accomplished through those free permits in the farmland zone. So that's why the total permits you see here don't exceed the harvest objective. So just to show on the map what it would look like in terms of the counties in the farmland zones that are recommending participating in the holiday hunt. And then the red counties would be the holiday hunt and the January extension. Farmland counties that are not shaded, have opted not to recommend or participate in that. And so again, in the map, as we're sharing it here, includes Iowa County shaded in red. But that's the one adjustment that we're making from what the CDACs are recommending. And then this also shows the CDAC's recommendations for free antlerless permits in their county. The shading of the lightest color being 1 to the darkest green being 4 free permits, that being the range across the county. So this just kind of shows how that plays out across the farmland zone. And then finally, usually we have to factor in for the northern part of the state, the winter severity index. And I think everyone welcomed from the aspect of deer management and the future of deer management that we recorded the lowest winter severity index on record this winter as it relates to a relatively high WSI the previous year. And that factors into the recommendations that those northern CDACs are looking at in consideration of an expected amount of herd growth we might expect coming out of a winter like this. But we also are aware that in 2024, we'll have the latest gun season that the calendar allows. And so we have kind of this confounding set of metrics that one would suggest we would anticipate an increased harvest because of the mild winter, but the late gun season might counterbalance that. And so from an expectation standpoint, we went into the decision process or recommendation process suggesting that we might see an overall harvest fall that is not going to be unlike last year. Considering those balances of those conditions that might be working against each other. But we'll, as we've seen in the past, we'll see how the conditions play out this fall, and we'll be back next year in response to those. So that's the background information I'd like to present, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there questions from the board?
We'll have them back up after the speakers.
Yes, we can do that. I'm just in terms of clarity on anything
Okay.
before we bring the speakers in.
Just one on how quotas are set versus how many permits are sold. We have 4 new board members who have not been through this June discussion. So if you could hit that again on how that calculation is made.
Sure, you bet. So the antlerless quota is the established intended antlerless harvest or the allowable harvest. And that is set in consideration of where the deer management unit is at relative to the objective of the unit. So in one example, if the objective of the deer management unit is to stabilize the deer population, but our harvest and population metrics would suggest that the population is growing, the quota would be increased to try to address that. And the inverse would be true if the objective was to allow the herd to grow, then maybe the quota would be reduced. So that's the objective of how many antlerless deer we're looking for to see taken in the fall. And then we know that in the issuance of permits, antlerless permits, to achieve that, harvest success is not 100%. It's not even close to 100%. It usually ranges more like 25%. So in an example of where the quota might be 1,000 and the past success rate is 25%, you'd issue 4,000 bonus permits to achieve that 1,000 harvest. And so that's where the permit levels actually, and the interest is really in the permit levels because that's what's going to influence, hopefully achieving that harvest quota.
Thank you.
Any other questions for clarifications? Doug, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Not a clarification question, more of a interest question. The winter severity index, Jeff, is trending more like you just described it. I mean, we're seeing a big peak one year and the lowest ever the next year. I'd like to see that trend for like the last 10 years. I mean, there's got to be some climate influence in there. It'd be interesting to see that, especially in our northern forest where most of the lower harvest totals are.
Yeah, thank you for that observation. And our Office of Applied Sciences recognized that the winter severity index has really served us very well in terms of just kind of treating this consistent, we get a score and it relates to what we can expect in terms of fawn productivity, in the next spring. But because of the way things have changed, they're recognizing that we may have to look at how that score is really assessed. Because, for example, what we experienced 2 years ago, even in some of the counties that scored low overall, they had a severe winter for just really the month of April. And so that throws a new twist into it, right? Because that March and April is really the key period of time. And so the dual values of snow depth and temperature, we're learning more about the influence of snow depth. And the snow depth is what is really fluctuating a lot more. And so we recognize the need to maybe look at adjusting to make sure that index is guiding us in the right direction.
Other questions? Okay, as Marcy noted, we've got 2 public speakers on this item. I'd like to go to the public comments and then we can re-engage with board questions and discussion after that. Our first speaker is Rob Bowman, the chair of the Wisconsin Conservation Congress. Welcome, Rob. I also want to add a comment. Rob is not held to the 3-minute limit. He has a statutory responsibility to advise the board, and we want to take full benefit of that advice. So, Rob, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, members of the board. I want to start out by thanking all of our CDAC members for their work this last year. This process would fail if it wasn't for their willingness to serve the sportsmen and women in their county. Wisconsin Conservation Congress supports the final season structure and quota recommendations advanced to you today by the department, except for the recommended changes to Iowa County. The WCC feels very much appreciates the DNR's efforts to reach out to the Congress and the Iowa County CDAC ahead of presenting these changes. However, the WCC feels that the recommendations of the CDACs should stand and their local recommendations should be supported by you today.
Okay, any questions of Rob? Marcy?
Hi, Rob. Good morning. As Jeff noted, and it's been discussed in the past, there are some CDACs with vacancies, and one that I know for sure has had vacancies for some time. What's the role of the Conservation Congress in helping fill those vacancies?
I think we
Or what
continue-
would you recommend? This is
Outreach.
okay.
So that's the only way to get them filled is outreach. Starts with our delegation, try and encourage your friends or acquaintances that they have to get involved in the process.
Other questions of Rob? I have one, Rob.
Yes, sir.
The board received correspondence from some members of the CDAC up in Bayfield County.
Mhm.
Apparently there was some misunderstandings or something in the process of the motions and everything. Did that issue rise at all to the review through the Congress chain and to your leadership council?
We had no discussions in that about Bayfield County yesterday when our DLC made the decision to represent what came out of our CDACs.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? We may run into, we may need to discuss further as we get into the discussion of this after we hear the rest of the input.
I don't believe I'm going anywhere yet. So.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, our next appearance is from Michael Foy. I understand this is going to be virtual. And Mike also submitted some written materials to the board on this subject. Mike, are you with us? There you are. Good morning, Mike.
Yes, I
Welcome.
am. Thank you, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and members of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board. Thank you for letting me speak to you today in support of Agenda Item 4D concerning the approval of the 2024-2025 Wisconsin Deer Season Framework. Specifically, I respectfully request that you approve the Department of Natural Resources recommendation that the archery season in Iowa County be extended to the end of January 2025, in contradiction to the Iowa County Deer Advisory Committee recommendation to close the season on January 5th. Having once served as a department wildlife biologist myself and a liaison to the Rock County CDAC, I support sharing responsibility with CDACs for soliciting, reviewing, and considering local input in forming Wisconsin deer management recommendations, amongst other legitimate input above. And their recommendations deserve faithful Department and Natural Resources Board consideration in the interest of wider acceptance of Wisconsin deer management policies. But while extension is not mandatory upon the department, the proposed archery season extension fulfills the only two standards provided under NR 10 for its approval: the location of Iowa County within a farmland zone and the co-establishment of a December 24th to January 1st antlerless only holiday hunt deer season. The extension has received overall public support from respondents to the Iowa County Public Input Survey for the past 6 years in a row, including for this upcoming fall. The extension was also supported by the department's Iowa County Wildlife Biologists and by the department's Deer Management Advisory Committee, who unanimously recommended holding the extended archery season in Iowa County to the department's wildlife leadership team. The rationale included that Iowa County has not met its antlerless deer harvest quota since before the CDACs were established in 2015, that the Iowa County deer herd suffers from a very serious CWD infection, and that extending the season in Iowa County would be consistent with the extension offered in all surrounding adjacent counties. To paraphrase, they appear to feel that we should be using all available harvest opportunity in Iowa County. Finally, approval of the department's recommendation will extend the archery season in Iowa County and provide me another 26 days of archery hunting on my own farm, where I particularly enjoy winter tracking and hunting over snow conditions. As you all know, there's no guarantee we get snow in December anymore. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions of Mike? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the additional written materials and the background data on this. Also mentioned, we've received some written inputs as well from delegates on the Bayfield County CDAC, raising concerns about the process and the numbers there. Okay, any further discussion from the board? Questions of Jeff?
Yes.
Marcy?
I don't know. Did
Go ahead.
others say yes? Do you want me to go first?
Yep, you're on.
Okay. So first, looking at specific counties, my neighbor, Sauk County, had a significant or somewhat of a change to their permit. When you look at a county in the farmland like that, when they change their permit, can you explain the rationale on this one, and how it relates to the farmland tags?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Marcy. It provides a good opportunity to see how strategies can change and be customized within a county advisory council. And so we were talking earlier about how the CDACs make a recommendation to provide potentially multiple free tags, upwards of 3 and 4. We've seen in a few examples and are in the recommendations this year. Sauk County it had in the past provided a lot, I believe 3 free tags. There's discussion about the pros and cons of multiple free tags versus maybe limiting it, but still providing that opportunity in the form of bonus permits that are for sale over the counter. And so I think what Sauk County chose to do was reduce their free antlerless permits, but then to compensate for that, they still wanted to provide the opportunity. And so they increased the number of bonus tags that would be available. With the intention would be to provide all the opportunity that hunters are interested in. And so they make sure there's enough permits available that they would not, sell out in a situation like that. So the increase you see in Sauk relative to last year was that compensation where they chose to reduce the access to free permits, but then made them available as bonus tags.
Okay, thank you. And then, just an observation in attending Vernon counties, the discussion was a small increase and hopefully some awareness of the population growth in the herd, that these counties in the farmland units, they can't sell enough or they can't hunt enough deer to meet that quota, but they want to send a message that there's a lot of deer out there, and that those tags increasing are representative, and hopefully getting the message out to more people, that there's definitely a herd problem in the Southwest. At least I'll just speak to that. Any comment on that?
No, just that again, it does reflect, and that was part of the intention, I believe, of having some degree of ownership at the county level, that you're going to see some variance in strategy. And I think for those farmland CDACs that have long recognized the challenge in getting an adequate antlerless harvest, it turns to more of a hunter psychology and marketing of the behavior of how do we send that message, as you explained, that increase the comfort level and the need to take additional antlerless deer. And in some cases, they choose to message that by, making more free tags available, or, setting their quota or their permit levels higher, to help send that message.
Yeah, okay. If I can continue, or do you want to?
Let's see if anybody else has any comments, questions.
I have some questions about the science behind public land versus private land hunting. And I don't know there, Marcy, if that's where you were going with your next set of
go ahead.
questions. But I guess I'm curious, especially in Bayfield County, if you could explain the science behind not having any opportunities for the public to hunt in public areas. Is there a scientific reason why there would be no opportunities for public hunting?
Sure, thanks for that question. I mean, to suggest that that there's a scientific basis to have a zero, what we would call zero quota, or, and that's the way we hear it phrased, but that's not really the way we approach it. I was explaining the quota earlier, the quota is assigned to the county as a whole. We don't create a separate quota for the private land and the public land. And this might speak to what Chair Smith brought up earlier about in terms of the potential procedural confusion that might have happened in Bayfield County, where it was treated as we're going to deal with private land, and it made the reference of a quota, and we'll talk about public land, separately. We establish a antlerless quota for the entire county. Then we establish how many permits, as I explained earlier, would be required to reach that quota. Then, after the permit level is set, you apportion those permits to private and public land. So then when you get to that issue of how many should be allotted to public land, the conversation shifts more towards looking at past harvest history. And has that harvest experience been acceptable in terms of, we usually refer to that or look at that as bucks killed per square mile. And they see the trend in that going down. And so the general first reaction is, well, if we reduce antlerless harvest, with the intention of changing the trajectory of that buck harvest, that's been a long held approach. And there is a scientific basis, to doing that. But then when you bring in the social part of it, there's also been a long held, diversion of opinion on whether the merits of taking antlerless deer or not. And we've known for all time, there's certain people that would say, if shooting fewer antlerless deer is better, shooting no antlerless deer is better yet. How could it not be? But from a scientific standpoint, what we've been sharing with the CDACs is, at a certain level, you're operating below what I would refer to as like a threshold of consequence. And so, although it may feel like, let's just, for the good of the future and the merits of saying, I'll sacrifice today for a better tomorrow, let's just not harvest any antlerless deer. What the science would suggest is, as long as you're taking less than a certain number of antlerless deer, your influence on the future trajectory is maybe insignificant. And so we look at those. And so we may say, for example, just as to round it off, as long as you're shooting less than one antlerless deer per square mile, your influence on the future is negligible. And so then the discussion becomes providing opportunity versus creating future opportunity. And so that's a challenging spot for the CDACs to navigate. And so when the public input comes in and they get a lot of support for, let's just not have any antlerless deer harvested this year, they're weighing that against, what we would acknowledge is that in almost all cases, the department in these discussions have usually said, there's room for minimal quota. And beyond that, then it is more of a social discussion. And we see that playing out in these various recommendations.
Other questions from the board?
So that begs the question, why didn't you moderate Bayfield County and use science and balance a little social there in that decision?
Sure. So to give you the history of how that process worked this year, and we've been in this position pretty much every year in some area of the state. And so when the CDACs made their recommendations, the next step is that those recommendations come to the department's Deer Advisory Committee. Now, our Deer Advisory Committee is made up of both staff and external stakeholder groups. That committee recognized the issue we're talking about, and they did recommend a very small, what I guess you would just refer to as a token number of permits be made available in those counties. But then that recommendation moves to the next level of administration, as we're going to, prepare the background memo in its entirety. And that issue, as we've been in the case in you're weighing the pros and cons, and that recommendation was not advanced, to the final. So the point being, there was a fair amount of discussion about the pros and cons of what to do. And in the end, knowing that we do it in as much as we can, say, we're going to try to support the CDAC recommendations. The department's recommendation was to support the original CDAC recommendation.
Okay, other questions? Marcy?
So in that same line, if you look at Bayfield and Oneida, CDAC's also set a goal, correct? And Bayfield's goal is to maintain, is it 3-year or 5-year goals?
The population objectives are set at 3 years, right?
3 years.
Yeah.
And when will they revisit those?
So they will, on our normal schedule, our 3-year, opportunity, was, we're there now. At the same time that we establish the new 3-year cycle for the CDACs, we also would establish, objectives for the next 3 years. We've got other things that we're working on that the option was to, or the decision has been to defer that, hopefully into next year. And I think in hindsight, that might work out good because as I mentioned earlier, we have brand new CDAC members that gives them a year to see how this works and see what the discussions are. So we would anticipate in the near future resetting. But so in the absence of having done that the last fall, the current objectives have stood. And so we've carried the maintain goal for another year.
Okay, so Bayfield is maintained, and if I looked at it correctly, Iron and Ashland are reduced or increase.
Yeah.
Increase, reduce quotas, increase population. So I think that that makes Bayfield unique as well, is that it looked like in the long term, without the ups and downs of the winter impacts, that they are maintaining a population. They're meeting that objective. And it's striking that Iron and Ashland went 0 antlerless on both public and private. And that seemed more consistent to me, not that I agree with it, but it seemed more consistent to me. So the issue of Bayfield and Oneida going 0 on public and having permits on private is an issue for me. And just to clarify, when we look at the science of it, of how a population is impacted, the hunt is one aspect, but there's also the habitat and predators, food source, et cetera. And I'm not hearing about any changes in the habitat management on public lands in Bayfield. And I mean, the number of acres in public land in Bayfield is always amazing to me anyway, compared to where we are. But can you talk a little bit about that, of how that would help as well, if there were habitat changes, or the deer don't care whether they're on public or private land. They seem to prefer hostas. But can you talk about how that interaction on the public land would make a difference?
Sure. So, and again, one of the challenge, Bayfield's not alone, but one of the challenges Bayfield County has is being, I believe, one of the largest counties in the state, and a tremendous amount of public land, as you shared. That public land comes in multiple forms. They have a lot of federally owned, and managed forest. They have a lot of county owned forest. They have several different ecotypes in Bayfield County, where the soil types create very different vegetative landscapes, and that's the habitat you're referring to. And so any habitat changes on those public lands, the influences of change of that, as much as we may have a directive that, or an idea that would say this would be what you're doing if the objective is to increase that land's carrying capacity for deer through habitat manipulation. The actual act of getting that habitat manipulation accomplished is really driven by the opportunity to harvest, timber. And so there's different market influences that are going on there. And then there's different objectives. And so the CDAC in Bayfield County gets faced with feedback from some of that public land that maybe is quite productive in its current state. But there's a fair amount of it that is, on the lower end of the scale, and that's where they get feedback from. And so the question then becomes is, if you provide opportunity for antlerless harvest on public land, where is that harvest going to be carried out? Are the hunters going to go to where the opportunity is probably better on some public land, or is there concern that they may go and try to fill those tags in a part of the county where the deer population is challenged, which would then, that's one of the driving concerns, I think, is that if you provide that opportunity, those deer may come from a portion of the county where it wasn't really desirable or intended. So then it really is the matter of, are we managing that effort versus, putting the opportunity out there and letting hunters figure it out and adjust accordingly, as we do with some of our other game species.
Yeah, and there are significant benefits. I mean, I am not a supporter of managing for one species. Those timber stands have great benefits as we talk about carbon credits and all kinds of other things too. So I think, just overall, and Bayfield, if you're listening, Oneida, if you're listening, I hear the concerns that there is reduced harvest and people are not seeing deer in specific places where they saw deer years ago. But looking at this overall, I have significant concern that we are sending a message that antlerless permits are on private land and not available on public land. And I think this board needs to take it very seriously that we send a message that whether you own land or have access to private land, we are doing whatever we can to offer opportunities, some opportunity on public land as well. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Robin, go ahead.
So I 100% share Marcy's concerns. I guess the one of the aspects that I'm worried about is we spend a lot of time and angst over how do we increase the hunting population? How do we increase hunters? How do we make sure that we have that heritage going forward? And I feel like by eliminating access to public land, you're sort of contradicting that desire to allow people to enjoy, have opportunities, and to have the next generation of hunters continue not only with the traditions, but with the science behind why, we have hunting to begin with, which is to help manage the population. And I find that it's really pretty disturbing that it feels to me almost like we're privatizing hunting, and I just feel like that's not the right direction to go in. And I know that's not the intent here. So I feel like that's maybe a little extreme of a statement. But I do agree that having zero harvest on public lands, especially in a county like Bayfield, where we have significant amounts of public land available, it's just not the right recommendation to make. And so I guess I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot, but I will. If there were to be, as Marcy had indicated, a token amount of harvest allowed on public land in Bayfield County, is there a number that you would suggest that would be that would not negatively impact the opportunities for people to hunt on private land, but allow some opportunity on public?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that question, Robin. And first of all, just as a point of clarification, I want to make sure we're clear that you can still hunt on that public land. We're not, okay, because
thank you.
Buck harvest authorizations are valid statewide. And so people can hunt on that land. Their opportunity to harvest the deer, in as much as that it's limited to bucks only, is really what we're influencing there. We do have, after looking at a decade of harvest research, trying to tie opportunity created with antlerless permits and then hunter effort and then buck harvest as a result of that influence of effort. The trends would suggest that when you turn down or turn off antlerless permit access, you are reducing overall effort. And I think we don't have real serious research on that yet. I think we want to dig into that further, but it stands to reason that a hunter in their party has an antlerless permit, at least one available there, at least the mindset of, hey, let's, we're going to put some more time and effort into, hopefully, if the objective is to harvest a deer for the freezer, you can see that. And so that's where, again, these CDACs are wrestling with, it's a chicken and egg type thing, right? Is future growth achieved by suppressing opportunity now, and that if things get better, they'll come back, versus maintain that opportunity, maintain that tradition by having the opportunity on the table if the risk of negatively influencing the future is minimal. So that's why we see a diversity of approach with those northern CDACs. You know, there are 4 or 5 northern CDACs that did shift, again, minimally additional opportunity on public land this year, operating with what I would suggest is, again, under that threshold of influence. And so we see them going both ways. And so that's why you see what's happening here. So to your question of if the intention of the board ultimately is let's create some opportunity, I guess my suggestion would be to look at other counties, other CDACs that have taken that approach of a very conservative, but provide some public opportunity, but keep it minimal. And so looking at their permit allocation, looking at the then results in terms of antlerless deer killed per square mile, you know, try to say, we want to provide a similar opportunity in those counties as other counties that are taking, again, that conservative approach and use some of that as a benchmark for a target number.
Just as a point of clarity, let me interject a little bit. Robin, you mentioned a couple of terms where you thought maybe you were overstating a particular point. The context that I think we're looking for as a board from Jeff would be professional recommendation from somebody that, you know, specializes in deer management here and running the program, and token might give the wrong impression. I don't think anybody's going to regard what you have to say as a, you know, as a token or make light of it. I see it more as a professional statement on some of the social issues that have some subjectivity to them.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
And I apologize because I just don't have the expertise to know the right language to be using. So I appreciate providing that clear.
You're doing fine. I just wanted on the record to kind of set a context for it.
Yeah. And as we've had, as Marcy mentioned earlier on another topic, I mean, we do have the opportunity to have a one-on-one briefings, you know, prior to this meeting. And so, you know, you've shared some of those concerns with me in the briefings. And so, and I appreciate, you know, being aware of that so that if you were going to take action, so to then follow through with that idea of what I just laid out, making it something that's somewhat comparative to some of the other counties. I looked at, in some of those situations, what we would expect the result to be this fall is to maybe have an antlerless deer harvested for every 3 or 4 square miles of public land, and you know, something in the neighborhood of 0.25 to 0.3 antlerless deer taken off of the land at the end of the season. So if you were going to take that approach to Bayfield's public land, and then then again, the success rate, we talked about that earlier too, right? If we were to look at it as if it's going to be acceptable, or the desire is to achieve a similar experience in terms of maybe an antlerless deer taken every 3 or 4 square miles in Bayfield County, that would generate a permit level of around 800 or just a little over that, you know. I mean, so, and actually in both of those counties, it kind of lands in that, right in that 800 permit value we would expect is going to generate a harvest of about 0.3 antlerless deer per square mile. So that's 1 antlerless deer taken every 3 or 4 square miles. And again, that's not going to, it doesn't happen uniformly on that landscape. There might be 30 square miles in Bayfield County that does not have an antlerless deer taken from it, and another one might have 5. That's just the way it plays out.
Other questions for Jeff? Marcy?
Just a clarification on that number. So a recommendation of 800 for Bayfield would still be a reduction by almost half from last year. Is that correct?
Their public land permits were 1,500 last year. Right. So yeah, you're looking at not quite 50, but 40-some% reduction from last year.
Okay. And Oneida only had 500 last year. And you would recommend 800 in Oneida as well?
Again, this becomes that, you know, the social versus the biological. Yes, is there, if you were going to treat it the same way based on past success rates, that would be a number you would come to. I also recognize the intentions and the expectations that maybe we wouldn't, so whether it be leave it at last year's 500, or again, the department's recommendation is to, acknowledge the recommendation from the CDAC. But if the request is a number, and if we were to treat the two the same, that 800 figure is pretty equivalent.
Other questions, comments?
Is Rob waiting to speak? Rob Bowman.
You want to come up now, Rob?
Again, I'm going to ask that you honor the work that our CDACs have done. I don't believe what Bayfield's trying to do is a long-term, is going to be, we're going to see this year in and year out. There are hunters that aren't fortunate to have private land, so they hunt public land, and their opportunities are this is a short-term move to increase their opportunity in the future. There's a lot of people that hunt public land and they're stop hunting because they're not seeing the deer on public land. That's why Bayfield made the decisions that they did. So this isn't, we're not going to see this year in and year out for the next 10 years. It's only a couple-year move to help increase that. You look at some other counties that were buck only year after year after year. And now, so these guys, we're asking you to make a sacrifice, a short-term sacrifice to better your future opportunities.
Are there questions for Rob? Marcy?
Then why wouldn't they have reduced it on private?
What's that?
Why wouldn't they have reduced their numbers on private?
You can have all the
Similar
tags
to-
you want on private land. You can triple it. You're not going to increase the harvest on private land. A lot of these hunters will go on public land to harvest their antlerless deer. We see that across the north. We see it in Florence County yearly. Guys will get their tags and go down to public land and shoot their antlerless deer. They refuse to shoot antlerless deer on private land. You can't control that. You can ask and encourage them to harvest the antlerless deer on private land, but you can't control how many deer are actually harvested.
But what we can control is that there might be somebody out there who hunts for venison and doesn't have access to private land.
But we're asking to increase that opportunity for them in the future. You can go out and see no deer this year. Next year, if by holding back on the amount of tags, you're going to go out and have a better experience next year because there are going to be more deer that are there on the landscape.
But the numbers show that there are deer on the public lands. You know, whether you look at last year's harvest snapshot or just
But do you want more?
driving through Bayfield. Right, I recognize they want more, but again, that message to anyone who only has the opportunity to hunt on public land, I think is the wrong.
Yeah.
And we'll have to agree to disagree, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess at that point, we have to look at the public comment and see what the public wants. So.
Okay. Doug?
Thanks, Chair. So if we know the private are getting their antlerless tags and hunting on public anyway, why don't we reduce the tags in private and give them to public? If they're gonna hunt on public anyway, why are we issuing so many on private and not on public? If that's where they're hunting anyway. A bit confusing for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Robin?
So, and just a clarification, Rob, I don't know if this is for you or for Jeff. I mean, it's for both of you, because what I thought I had heard Jeff say was that if you have a small amount of harvest in an area, you know, there's like zero harvest versus a small amount is not going to have a significant change. It's not going to affect the size of the herd per se. There's a number at which, below which it doesn't matter. If you take one out of every, I'm sorry, one every 3 miles. I mean, Jeff, I can't remember exactly what it said. Apparently I didn't write it down well enough to read it. But so I guess that's where this balance of perception and science and access and trying to also honor the recommendations of the county. It all kind of gets jumbled together a little bit. And I just wonder if we don't also try to honor the recommendations of the county, but also provide that additional opportunity where it's not going to have that negative impact that they're worried about. Because I appreciate the concern about wanting to continue to grow the herd and the dynamics of public lands versus private. So I guess, Rob, I'm just wondering if you share that perspective that there's a small amount that won't negatively impact that growth potential. And then if I'm incorrect in that interpretation, Jeff, if you could clarify that. So however.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And I think Rob we could collaborate on, he is bringing, as he suggested, they're hearing from a lot of people that like that strategy of zero, in terms of maximizing the expeditious potential response in the population. So that reference I'm making to how many antlerless deer could be taken without there actually being an influence, we have the ability to customize that by deer management unit, right? So as for the purposes of what you asked earlier, I referenced, and looking at what some of the other units are doing, that we're certainly at that one antlerless deer harvested per 4 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles is in that arena of you can adjust it up and down and you're not really going to see an influence, in the future. In another county, like if we were to move over to that Ashland Iron County area, it might be one antlerless deer per 20 square miles, because there is a difference in productivity and harvest in those areas. So that's kind of what led us to this. And again, just looking for a reference point that would treat them, somewhat in the same realm that we've seen with some of the other counties doing.
So the comment, I don't have it in front of me, that we received from Bayfield County on their CDAC meeting, where he tried to make the motion to increase the public, but couldn't get it in for sound like logistical reasons, or points of order reasons. If that motion would have been made in order, would it have passed?
I don't think we know.
If it would have, it then would be a recommendation that we'd see in front of us.
It might have changed the recommendation. Yeah, it might not have. Been a hot debate up there for a long time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I have a couple. One, Jeff, could you briefly go back to the recommendation on the Iowa County extended season? Do you have insight why the CDAC decided they did not want to have the extended season there? Was there some unique reason or interaction with a recreational activity, or what was the thinking behind that created this big difference between them and all the other counties around them?
Yeah, I think it does reflect the challenge that the CDACs have when they are asked to consider the public input and then put the different forms of public input in perspective, whether it's that online survey that we referenced earlier, whether it's the actual attendance, at the meeting, whether it's an individual like Mr. Foy that is, made a presentation to you today, and he also made that presentation to our committee. Then it's a matter of there's numbers in terms of public input, but then there's content, and we encourage that the CDACs don't just follow the raw numbers as if it's a vote. But it's a reflection of a piece of input, but to really listen to the content of it. And they do get caught between, we're hearing from people that are saying, if you have the extension, they perceive that real or perceived as a potential user conflict. And that's usually what that discussion of that January extension comes down to. Is it going to create a user conflict with others? And in Iowa's case, I believe they felt that what they were hearing was from individuals that caused them to lean towards the side of, we're not going to do it. Other counties have been in that position as well. But if you look at the pattern over the last number of years throughout the farmland, and I meant to mention this in my opening presentation, and I forgot to acknowledge that the number of counties that are participating in the holiday hunt and that January extension has slowly increased every year. There's a little bit of churn, but we're now at the point where 41 counties are participating. And so a minimal number, are not. So there's just been this trend of acceptance, and a fair amount of the, again, content of feedback that we've received is an interest in that January extension. Right now, it's tied to the holiday hunt. It's a prerequisite, right? But we get a fair amount of feedback from people saying, I like the idea of being able to archery hunt till the end of January. I'm not necessarily a fan of the holiday hunt. I wish we could not have the holiday hunt, but still continue hunting till the end of January. So that's just an example of how diverse that feedback comes through. And so I understand, Iowa County saying, given what we've got, this is our, the way we're going to take it.
Okay. And then, comment on the Bayfield situation. We've had a lot of discussion about it. To me, it comes down to a really basic philosophy, and it really gets at the mission of what the department and the board are all about. And we need to take into account the science and the management and the biology and stay true to that. But along the way, one of the other goals of the mission statement is to provide opportunity for all, for everybody. And I look at Bayfield County as an example of maybe, I understand the need for pressure on private land and to increase the harvest and the need to harvest more deer. And I don't argue with that. I respect the CDAC. They know their local situation better than anybody, and they're struggling with very difficult issues with people that have very strong opinions. We share that with them. And I respect that and tend to support what we get out of the CDACs. In this case, I question whether or not an ample harvest authorized or recommended by the Bayfield County CDAC, a substantial harvest all on private land, if it hasn't gone too far and crossed the line in being able to provide opportunity for all. That doesn't mean equal opportunity. I don't debate the numbers needed for harvest. I accept that as the best shot we've got. The department supports that. I respect that. I'm concerned about the social decision of how to direct that harvest through the tags. And we have many counties that have many more, higher percentage of antlerless tags on private land than they do on public. That's routine, it's common, it's accepted. In this case, we've got a county that has an ample harvest goal, and they have zero opportunity on public land. And as a hunter up north, I'm familiar with a lot of situations where the land ownership pattern is checkerboarded. You've got a 40 of private land, you've got a half a section of public land, you've got another 20 acres of private, or a 40 or an 80, and they're checkerboarded. And it doesn't matter what tag you've got in your hand to hunt antlerless deer, whether it's private or public, you're going to be going after the same deer in that local area because they don't respect those boundaries. And they're available on public land and they're available on private land. I understand what Rob's saying. I hear the same thing up there, that a lot of private landowners, when they get an antlerless tag, they go harvest it somewhere else. And you get the impact on public lands, and the public hunters are concerned that they're not seeing as many deer. The sign's not there, the deer aren't there, and I'm sure that's the case in many locations. But the bottom line is, to me, there needs to be a social adjustment here to at least provide some opportunity for public hunters and cases where there is going to be a substantial harvest. And, you may have a situation where you've got a solid block of public land and a solid block of private, and you can steer the harvest that way just by what kind of tag you issue as to where the deer is going to be harvested. But in many cases, those lands are intermingled, and there's access to deer on private and public that's kind of side by side. And my concern is that we've gone a little too far in this case, and would ask staff, Congress, and the CDAC process to consider that in their deliberations in the future. That there is at least some semblance of public opportunity when it gets down to taking those numbers that are negotiated and applying it to the quotas. Rob, please do.
You want Kevin Shannon, one of our district leadership council members. Kevin Shannon is from Bayfield County. He's here with us today, and he's also the chair of the Bayfield County CDAC.
Yep.
It'd be appropriate if you want to ask him a couple of questions. What brought him to make the decision that they did?
I'd ask the board, do you want access to talk with Kevin? I've talked to Kevin and I appreciate that. Other board members? Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome, Kevin. Just treat this just like a bigger CDAC meeting.
Wonderful, thank you.
You've had quite a challenging job up there over the last few years and appreciate the effort you put into that.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so as you all know, Bayfield County has historically had a pretty controversial CDAC. This particular year, as we started our meeting, so we had some motions that were put forth that were not in the traditional way in which we had been operating, at least as long as I had been operating as chair of our CDAC. And those motions were phrased in a way that were very confusing to everybody. So it took some time to sort through those. And as chair, I tried to make sure that we sorted through those. And all of those failed because they were inappropriately worded. So then when we got to the motions that as we typically had done over the last few years, the motion was put forward to set the quota and to have all of that quota be on public land. And the person who made the motion, I think unintentionally made the motion in such a way that all of the tags, all of the quota would be on public lands.
Right.
But because of the way in which we had confusion earlier, we ended up approving it as stated. And then we were at a point of, well, we had already set our quota and already distributed those. So once that was approved, it became clear to the person who made the original motion that they had mistakenly worded it in a way that didn't allow for public harvest. So that's kind of how we ended up where we did. That said, I also, as a member of the Conservation Congress, is very important in representing the public. It is true that public comment is pretty consistent about wanting to see more deer on public land. That hunters are recognizing that they're not seeing the deer that they used to see on public land. So there's a strong contingent of public land hunters who are very vocal, and they've been vocal to you individually and through the CDAC process, that say, we want zero harvest on public land so that ideally sometime in the future, we will be able to see more deer. And again, that can run counter to what the science tells us, but the public has that strong belief. So as a CDAC, we again are kind of faced with this really challenging situation of trying to balance all the science, all the public comment, and all the social aspects that you've heard about. And it became, in Bayfield County, it's especially challenging because so much of our land is public. So that's how we ended up where we did with our recommendation this year.
Robin?
So thank you for that. That's really helpful to understand. And I appreciate the challenges of managing meetings when there's a lot of input and trying to follow quorum and things like that. So thank you for your efforts in that. I guess I'm the only, I'm not even sure if it's a question, but so how do you balance the science with the kind of more emotional expectations but yet still respect the desires of people for the end goal of having more animals in more antlerless deer productivity in the public areas. So I guess that's the challenge we have as a board But what I don't want to have happen is to have there be a feeling that we are ignoring the interests of the CDAC discussions and comments. So I just wanted to share that I think there's, you know, as a science-driven agency, it's really hard for us not to follow the science, but recognize that there's also high emotions and maybe at some point some distrust of science.
Yep.
Thank you.
And sorry, Doug, you asked, would it have passed if there were public? I can't say that as chair for sure. If you can look at our past votes, we have traditionally allowed some public harvest. And again, that has met with strong resistance from some public members, but traditionally in Bayfield County, if you look at our past, we have. But again, I can't guarantee how that would have turned out this particular year.
Well, you're right, Kevin. We've heard the voices that you're hearing as well for the last several years. Very concerned about deer on public land in Bayfield County. I think the CDAC has made a tremendous move to shift the balance from public to more harvest on private. I think in making that to an absolute zero is gone too far for me personally, and philosophically, I just believe there needs to be public opportunity there. And again, throw it back in your lap to make the best judgment for the values of your community. But we're hearing loud and clear from people that we haven't heard from before that are now saying, oh my gosh, we need at least some public opportunity up here. So it's, you know, the loud voice, you react to it and you get another reaction.
Yeah, and I understand. I'm the same. So when I'm in the grocery store in Iron River and the folks come up to me, a lot of them come up to me and say, you know, thank you for the public land harvest. You know, please give us that public land harvest. I harvest the venison for my family and someone else. And so I see that, I hear that as well too. It's a tough balance for us. So, and I understand it's a tough balance for you. Thank you for giving me the time to speak with what happened this year.
Appreciate that. That gives us some additional insight. Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Bill. I just want to make a comment. I'm probably the least qualified to talk on this, but we talk about tradition all the time, and I understand delayed gratification very well, but I think that we risk breaking tradition so much that you know, even if the deer come back, well, the hunters come back. You want to keep some sort of continuity in the public opportunity, so the northern deer hunt continues. We saw in COVID how traditions can end, and I don't think we should take that chance lightly.
All right, thank you. Jeff, you still available? I have one more question on a matter we haven't talked about yet. At the end of your briefing paper, you had a subject of basically other issues that came through the CDAC process, not directly related to deer numbers, but deer management issues. Some of the examples were a strong call for habitat-based boundaries in the DMUs. Other people refer to it as maybe a subunit in some of the bigger counties, like Bayfield. I think that's been traditionally one of the difficulties there, is they have a very different habitat base and deer herd numbers in different parts of the county. Other issues were deer tagging, registrations. You know, there's a variety of things where people wanted to go back to the way it was. Without commenting on any of those in particular, how are we going to address those? We've had them come up the last few years. Will there be an opportunity to address that and to at least get input on it and discuss it with the public and the Congress and see if there are changes there that are necessary and worthwhile?
Yeah, thank you for bringing attention to that part of the information, because we do, as is the case with Conservation Congress members are familiar with this at the end of their committee meetings. There's always an opportunity at the end to just share things that are not part of the agenda decision point, but from an awareness standpoint. And so we've always included that information as a matter of as just that information. Some of them relate to administrative code change interest. Some might be statutory, some might simply just be for awareness for the future. And so we try to just capture those that are recurring for the awareness of the board, that because in the layout of the advisory councils, I mean, we do lay out, this is your charge in terms of your specific needs, but we also do provide the opportunity to make observations or requests on other things, and they can come in a number of different forms. And so I believe the one you mentioned first, as it relates to habitat-based units, really comes back to the foundation of the conversation we've had for the last half hour, which really creates the challenge that we're trying to sort out today. And that recognition of that is showing up, is showing up in that format. And so at a point between the agency and the board, as a matter of if it's an issue that is to be addressed through a rule change, we stand ready to facilitate, whatever information discussions to do that process.
Well, before there's a rule change, there needs to be a discussion.
So we try to capture what the discussion that has been happening. And, as you're aware, there's a process to that I would hope that at least in, later this year, have the opportunity, the privilege to be back before you, asking to, take some of this back out to the public for actual, considerations in the process.
I don't want to put you on the spot any more than this, other than to identify there are these other issues floating out there, and the process works. They've been forwarded up through the system. And I'd ask you to go back and discuss it with leadership. And from my perspective, some of those are going to deserve attention, and would like to see further discussion with the people that we serve and our partners like the Congress, and get advice on them and see if there's something there that's worth moving ahead on. It might help solve some of these other management challenges that we've got.
Yep, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'd like to make an amendment to the recommendation. Do you want the motion first or the amendment?
Well, which way would you prefer to handle it? We can ask for a motion on the recommendation and then consider an amendment after that.
Yeah.
That might
Okay.
be the proper way to do it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the department's recommendation on the quotas. So say that again, motion, then amend.
Yeah.
Just move.
Just move the motion,
Move
just
the
a
motion.
straight motion. Right.
No, don't you want to amend?
Get a second.
Discuss. Right. Go ahead and make a motion. We'll get a second, and then there's room for board discussion after that, and then we can consider an amendment or various amendments,
Okay,
if you're comfortable with that. Not trying to tell you what to do, just directing traffic.
no, I thought we put the amendments up first to the motion. Okay, motion to approve the department's recommendation.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? We have a second from Doug. Now, is there discussion?
Yes, I'd like to amend the recommendation on Bayfield and Oneida counties. Given what we've heard today and the input and the sense that we need some opportunities on public land. For Bayfield, I would amend it to, because they talked about their overall quota, that on private, we would go to 4,110. On public, we would go to 400. And that is based on what they harvested antlerless on public last year, as well as taking into consideration the staff comment and the public input. On Oneida, I would amend to add 400 on public and leave private as they recommended.
So let me just understand the amendment. You're adding 400 on public and leaving private the same, then you're actually increasing
The
the
quota.
overall quota,
in Oneida,
the target.
not in Bayfield.
Would you consider living with the recommended harvest number and just distributing that differently?
Isn't that what I'm doing?
Oh, you're increasing the harvest number. If the way you worded it, I don't know if that's your intention or not. So in other words, they've got, take Bayfield County, they've got their harvest quota set at a number and it's all on private. If we leave that the same and add some on public, then the overall harvest is going to be higher yet.
She did reduce the.
Yeah,
Did you make a reduction?
I did.
Okay,
Bayfield, but I didn't hear that for Oneida.
No, because the number on Oneida on private is already pretty low. And I heard Jeff say that Oneida could handle 800 on public. So I'm just adding an opportunity, sorry?
500.
500.
500 Oneida.
Bayfield.
I thought you said 800 on both Oneida and Bayfield, Jeff.
Not my notes.
Yeah, so just to clarify what I shared, if your objective was to generate or allow a harvest of 0.3 antlerless deer on public land and treat the two the same, that would equate to, in Bayfield, it's 830 permits, and then Oneida, it's 815. That's based on square miles of land. Those two counties do experience different success rates. So that's why the harvest number and the permit availability is a little bit different. That's one of those nuances. And so I looking at the history of the success rate in Oneida and Bayfield being somewhat different, it just happens to turn out that end result of antlerless deer harvested per square mile would probably be generated with a relatively similar number of permits in that 800 ballpark.
Bottom line, 800 then would go into where? In Oneida.
So as I understand what the discussion was, again, is are we comfortable just adding that many permits, which will add a couple hundred deer, into the harvest, which then if you start with a quota, if you kept your quota and you didn't want to add what that might result in to the end harvest, you'd shift the total permits that are currently available and shift some of them to public land versus just leaving things alone in private land, adding some permits. And going back to that conversation we had about operating under that threshold of influence, it's our opinion that you could add those public permits without adjusting the overall quota and private land. But that you could go either way. That's in history, that's been done in the past at this point where a small number in the hundreds of permits have been either added or taken off without adjusting the quota. So I think where you're at is the decision of if your intention is to put some permits on public land, are you going to leave the quota alone and shift some permits or just add those with a comfort level that it's not really going to influence?
I would caution the board about going too deep into the numbers and the science and the details, particularly on short notice and kind of ad hoc here. I think if we stick to more policy philosophy, I'd be comfortable if we honor the harvest numbers that the CDACs have presented and that the staff have supported as our experts on local social issues and also on deer management science. And I think our concern there is how that harvest quota is then distributed to people to give a little more fair and balanced opportunity. And I think if we send that message, what we're asking of Jeff is not to rethink the science and not to rethink the CDAC, but to think about the distribution of that quota and who has opportunity to harvest.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to make a recommendation that we have an opportunity to discuss this with legal counsel to make sure that whatever motion is before the board is understood and clear so that we are not inadvertently making any decisions without full understanding of what the board is trying to accomplish and what the understanding of what staff is trying to provide.
I think that's good advice.
Does that require going into closed session or having a different?
My understanding is.
I would suggest we're well past break. Might be a good time to take a break.
Chair. So Marcy's motion was not entertained then because it was on the floor. She was
No,
attempting to put a
she's got
motion
it,
on the
she's
floor.
got it on the
I mean,
floor.
amendment, sorry.
Right, the amendment hasn't been entertained. It's just been discussed. It hasn't been made. There hasn't been a second on it.
Right. I think he was
For my
attempting
record.
to make an amendment. I guess she's withdrawing the attempt. Or no? Because for one, I would like to hear the extent of the attempt. I understand your concerns. But she started to make an attempt at amendment. I would like to hear the full extent of the amendment, have an opportunity to debate that. Because, and again, I understand the concerns. I do. This board, the entire board may not support the amendment anyway. And we wouldn't go through the exercise of taking a break and debating it, but.
Well, we've talked about this extensively. Let's just quickly try to capture the essence of Marcy's amendment. We'll have something before us. And maybe that would be a good time to take the break for further discussion with legal, and we can come back and address the amendment.
Thank
If people are comfortable with that, just as a way to handle this process.
That's why I asked if you wanted to separate the counties. Was to clarify that what we heard with Bayfield was the overall number. And then we would take from that to give some opportunity on public land.
What, if you want to do it that way, that might be a little easier, just to keep each one as a separate discussion.
So I would amend the staff recommendation on Bayfield to have 400 available on public and 4,110 available on private. On Oneida. Okay, let's do Bayfield.
Okay,
Mhm.
so we've got a motion to amend and shift 400 of the antlerless harvest from private to public in Bayfield County.
Second.
And we have a second from Deb. Okay. Any comments, discussion from the board for clarity purposes?
I'd like to hear from that. Kevin? Is this going to impact your area? Is this going to make your people happy? No, I'm just curious.
I'll just, as Kevin's coming up, so just to lay out the understanding, if, so 400 permits would result in somewhere in the neighborhood of a harvest of 100 antlerless deer over 800 square miles. So that's one antlerless deer per 8 square miles.
Mhm. Understood.
Yep.
Thank you.
Kevin, you're still willing to come up? Thank you.
He's never going to come in person.
Will it make people, it will likely make most members of the CDAC happy. There will probably be public pushback. As I said before, in Bayfield County for the last 5 years that I've been chair, there is a very large, vocal, strong contingent that does not want any antlerless harvest on public lands. And the CDAC has consistently weighed that in relation to the science. And we have tried to balance that social aspect with what the science is telling us as a body. This year, again, I believe, this is a belief, I cannot say for sure we would have ended there, that we would have allowed some public harvest. I believe that's the case. I cannot say that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your community should be like happy that you're here.
And his hours of service.
Mhm.
Okay, so we got a
We've got
motion
Bayfield,
and a second for Bayfield.
yes.
And did you want to speak to Oneida or?
Don't we have to vote on
Vote on the
Bayfield?
amendment.
Vote on the
Okay.
amended Bayfield first.
Yep, I guess you're right. Okay, any more discussion on Bayfield County?
Just point of clarification, Marcy, why 400 and not 800 as,
Because we're hearing from the public that they wanted it reduced. And so obviously they don't accept the science that it's not going to be an immediate increase. It's just that balance of,
okay, good point.
thank you.
So any more comments on Bayfield? We have a motion before us to amend the primary motion to move 400 antlerless harvest quotas from private tags to public. That catch it, Marcy?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Amendment passes. Okay,
Jeff, a question on Oneida. Oneida's numbers are significantly smaller than Bayfield's. So the recommendation from staff on Oneida, based on the science, is that it could handle 800 on public.
So again, looking at past history in Oneida County, and I'm looking at the numbers myself just to show that, yeah, that this is because there's proportionally less public land in square miles in Oneida than there is in Bayfield. But the reason that if you wanted to treat them similarly in terms of, again, achieving a harvest in the neighborhood of 0.25 or 0.3 antlerless deer, because the success rate on those permits has been lower historically in Oneida County, you could provide more permits to achieve the same objective. And so that's why if you took that approach, it still arrives in that 800 ballpark. But, also, as we talked about last year, that was 500. And as you shared with Bayfield County, recognize the intent to, show a degree of reduction, you're weighing that into adult as well.
Marcy, I'd be concerned that we're gonna overcorrect here a little bit.
Right, but we still want to give an opportunity.
We do, but we need to be respectful too of the message that we've got from
Right.
Oneida County CDAC.
We could consider 400 for that too.
But then you take that from 2160.
Yes.
It's significant.
Robin?
Could I ask a question of Jeff while you're thinking about this?
Go ahead.
I haven't made
ahead.
a motion on this amendment.
So, I just want to be perfectly clear because what's been pointed out for Oneida County is the overall quota of 2160 is a pretty low number. And so I think the concern is that number is based on past hunting harvest rates and numbers of deer that are estimated to be in that area. So am I correct that you're comfortable that the 2160 should be the quota for that county? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, thanks. And again, as always happens, we interchange the term quota and permits. And so the quota, the harvest that the CDAC and Oneida agreed to and is recommending is 540 antlerless deer harvested. Based on the success rates they've seen in the past, you'd provide 2,160 permits to kill those 540 deer. So that's at a scale, again, relative to that conversation with Bayfield, we're talking about half. And I think what I heard Marcy questioning is if we use the same strategy and you use 400, you're taking 400 from 2,000 as opposed to, so it's a bigger bite. And so
Right.
that's what you're trying to sort out is do we, again, are we wanting to use the same approach? Because of the quota in Oneida is less than half of what Bayfield's is. You're starting out with fewer permits.
So is there a proportion that we could make these equate to? So the 400 is what percentage of the Bayfield population, and whatever that percentage, what would that result in the public harvest being?
200.
Is it 200?
So, yeah, so the success rate, again, is a little bit lower in Oneida County. And so, and there's fewer square miles. So if you were to provide, again, we used 800 as a reference. If you were to take that down to 400, we're talking about dozens of deer. It's going to be less than 100 harvested. If at 400, we would anticipate less than 100 deer actually harvested off of public land. Now, again, in that history, as you reduce permit numbers, the success rate slides up. There's just that counterbalance. So the lower you go with permit availability, the success rate, you'd maybe say instead of using a 20% success rate, you might use a 30% success rate. So that's the math that's behind trying to arrive at something.
Again, I'd caution the board not to get into this
Right,
level
so-
of detail.
Right, so
We've got an important philosophical message we're trying to send. And I would also add that there are many other counties that have private-public ratios that are greater than what we're talking about for Oneida. So again, let's not overcorrect here.
Mhm.
Let's just rely on staff to implement the message I think that we're trying to send.
So looking at how I thought about Bayfield and what they harvested antlerless last year, do you have access to what Oneida harvested antlerless quickly, or is that a pain?
On, I knew it was doesn't it? That's we test.
Yeah, 797.
Hmm?
So that
797.
Antlerless?
That's what a harvest.
yeah, yeah.
What about there?
I'm almost there.
Mhm. Oh, not actual.
No, that's
Well, somebody else can make the amendment if you've done the
On
math.
public land,
Yeah, if you-
last year, Oneida County, 186 harvested deer on public land.
and they have 500.
Now,
So that gets us back.
when
to
we,
200.
another nuance, and for informational purposes, great, but I want to respect Chair Smith's not to get too far in the weeds. When we look at total antlerless harvest, that's different than the quota-driven antlerless harvest, because there's antlerless deer taken by junior permits and other things. And so what I'm sharing with you now is the total antlerless harvest, some of which would have included. So the permit-driven antlerless harvest is what's in the historically, I think that's in the in your document in table 2 or 3. I can look at that.
Mr. Chair, I have to reiterate, I think it's appropriate if we are going to continue this discussion, we take a recess and better understand what the questions are. I believe that we don't want to unintentionally put staff on the spot to begin to answer questions about something that's very complicated without providing the proper amount of time to research and provide the best answers possible.
Thank you. Cheryl, I have a question for you just on procedure. We're in the middle of a motion and amendments. Can we recess at this point and just stop where we're at and then re-engage after a break?
Yes.
Thank you. I suggest we recess at this point if there are no objections. It's about 11:15. That's 15 minutes going to be enough. we'll we'll come back into session at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Let's go back into session. We're on action item 4D, requesting approval of the 2024 deer season recommendations. We have a main motion that has been approved. We have an amendment that's been approved, and we have a discussion about a potential another amendment. Okay, Paul.
I will move to further amend the motion on the floor to increase the public quota on Oneida to 400.
Point of clarification, are you increasing that or taking it from the?
Increasing that.
You're increasing it, okay? So it would increase the overall harvest in Oneida County.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion to amend that would increase public harvest from 0 to 200. 400.
400.
Oh, I said, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that. 0 to 400 in Oneida County. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Doug. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Amendments approved. So we have a main motion that has been amended twice. Any further discussion from the board? Okay, I'll call the question on the amended motion. This would be the supporting the staff recommendations with amendments that change the Bayfield public harvest and the Oneida public harvest for antlerless deer. Any questions, comments? Doug?
One question. So the main motion includes Iowa's extended season. DNR's recommendation is to include Iowa in that extended season, right?
That's the staff recommendation for an extended season, yes.
Wanted to make sure.
Other questions, comments? Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you all for your input and patience. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, open forum. We have one public appearance under open forum. Ms. Diane Kane from Hickston. Diane, are you with us?
I am.
All right,
yes.
welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm Diane Kane. I'm a follower of the rights of nature, also known as the RON movement, which is gaining traction amongst the public. I served as a delegate for the Wisconsin Conservation Congress, also known as WCC, from April 2020 to April 2024. The Ho-Chunk Nation has adopted the rights of nature as a resolution. The RON movement gives personhood to our wildlife, trees, plants, air, water, hills, and all life. RON has been around since 2008 and has been adopted by 100 countries on 6 continents, including North America and Milwaukee County. The WCC is Wisconsin's advisory board to the NRB. Statistics using WCC resolutions for the past 20 years revealed 98% of wildlife-friendly resolutions were rejected by the WCC, thereby not representing 88% of Wisconsin's non-consumptive users. The general public is likely unaware their votes cast in good faith on the WCC spring questionnaire may be upended at the WCC convention with retooled results submitted to the NRB. Perhaps then it is no accident. Wisconsin ranks 6th in the nation most at risk for losses from overexploitation, with species being removed from the wild faster than they are replaced. Case in point, seasonal hunting and trapping are allowed in most of our state parks and trails. No bag limit with year-round hunting targeting coyote, snowshoe hare, opossum, skunk, weasel, porcupine, and woodchuck, even while birthing and lactating. Electronic predator calls, hunting with GPS technology, trail cams pinpointing the location and habits of hunted animals, canned hunts, wildlife killing contests, and captive live animal penning for hound training have all fostered a shooting gallery mindset. Climate change is creating a deadly situation for millions of wildlife caught in fires, drought, floods, hurricanes, hail, and tornadoes. Wild animals make up just 4% of land-based and marine animals on Earth. Humans account for 36% and livestock for 60%, excluding poultry. A report from Nature Serve Explorer, leveraging nearly 50 years of data, revealed an alarming conclusion. 40% of wildlife in the USA are at risk of extinction. Rights of nature needs to be part of our natural resource ideology. Wisconsin's wildlife are imperiled by killer storms, zoonotic disease, habitat loss, predator hatred, looming extinction, and human encroachment. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Diane. Are there any questions? I guess not, Diane. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no other appearances under open forum today. We'll move on to informational items. Item 6A, results of public input on the 2024 Fisheries Management Spring Hearing Agenda of advisory questions. Justine Haas, Fisheries Management Bureau Director. Welcome, Justine.
Good morning again. Thank you, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and members of the board. As Chair Smith just said, I'm Justine Haas, the Bureau Director for the Fisheries Management Program. So earlier this year, we had come before the board and did an information item going through the questions that we were going to ask on this year's annual spring hearing questionnaire. They were all advisory in nature. And so today I am here to present the results from that and let you know what the next steps are. So all questions for this year, we had 7 questions for fisheries. All of these questions were advisory in nature. And all the results are currently with our species teams. So we have different species teams within our fisheries program. So the results are with those groups. They're reviewing it, looking at how each of the different counties voted to these different questions. And those, just so everyone's aware, our species teams comprise of department staff, so biologists, technicians, supervisors from the fisheries program, a research scientist from the Office of Applied Science, a biological staff member from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and a member of the Wisconsin Conservation Congress. So this group of people got the questions that were related to them back to them with those results, and they have till July 1 to be reviewing those, make any adjustments based on these results, and they will get them back to myself. And then my larger management team will review those in July. So the results that you're going to see today are basically the sort of raw results that came out of the hearing this spring. So as I said, we had 7 questions, and the first question was to develop an administrative pathway to allow for making angling regulation changes without using the very long process in very specific cases where we are seeing conservation need, where waiting 3 years to go through the process is too long for us to do that because we feel it will cause harm. This was highly supported. 86% of voters statewide supported this, and the Conservation Congress at their annual meeting also voted to advance this question. The second question was to change the statewide inland trout open season to the first Saturday in April. Currently, there is a catch and release season from January through the first Saturday in May on some waters in the state, and then the season opens in May. This one had a little more mixed results, but there was 65% overall support statewide, and at the Conservation Congress meeting, the annual meeting, this was also advanced. Question 3 was a little more tight on how people viewed this question. This was looking at going to try to simplify the regulations that we have for trout and going to a 1 statewide county bag regulation of 5 trout with no minimum size limit. This was supported by about 53%, so it was sort of a 50-50 mix. So what we're looking at right now is how each of the individual counties voted and how and what we should do. and maybe make some changes to this as it moves forward in this process. At the Conservation Congress annual meeting, this was advanced from the floor to be proposed to be moved forward. The fourth question was for making trolling with 3 lines per angler on all inland waters of the state. Is currently allowed on the majority of waters, but there are several counties that have lakes that do not have this. Again, this was a much closer vote. It was supported by 57% of the people taking the survey. And in the Conservation Congress, they rejected moving this forward. We are looking, especially in those counties where we have the 1-line regulation right now, as to how those votes went. And we'll be looking to make amendments to this, deciding whether we're going to move it forward or not. For question 5, this was a catch and release season for lake sturgeon on a subset of waters that have lake sturgeon across the state that we believe have populations that are strong enough to withstand this. This was supported by 65% of the votes, and it was also advanced by the Conservation Congress. Question 6 was to create a season closure for shovel-nosed sturgeon on the lower Wisconsin River during the spawning period in the spring. That was supported by 91% of the people, so very strong support for that question. And again, that was advanced by the Conservation Congress. And finally, question 7 was to lower the bag limit to 25 fish daily bag limit on white bass on the Winnebago system waters. And this was supported by 85% of the voters. And again, the Wisconsin Conservation Congress advanced this question. So, as I said, all of these questions are currently sitting with our staff and our species teams to review how these votes went, to make recommendations to the fisheries management team to determine if they move on to the 2025 questionnaire. Additionally, at the Wisconsin Conservation Congress annual meeting, we brought back a question from the 2023 spring hearings regarding changes to the northern muskie season. The Congress in 2023 had voted against the public vote, and there was some questions and concerns about that proposal, along with some stocking decisions the state was making. We had further conversations with the muskie groups, with Conservation Congress members, and with the Wisconsin Conservation Congress's Warm Water Committee. It was brought back to the floor at the annual convention, and at the annual convention, it was voted to now advance that question. So that question is back with our muskie team, and they're reviewing that to determine if we are actually going to put that back forward through in 2025 as well. So with that, that is the summary of all the 7 advisory questions that Fisheries asked this year. And if there are any additional questions for me, I would be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Justine. Any questions from the board? Doug.
Thanks, Chair. Justine, on the Lake Sturgeon hook and line catch and release opportunities, the list of waters doesn't include the Wolf River. Is it already included?
No.
And what was the thinking behind not including it?
I actually, Doug, I do not know the answer to that question. I can talk to Margaret and ask why it was not added to the
I'd
list.
be interested to hear, because reading the justification on why we're doing it and the incidental take that may be occurring, you look at the Wolf River system and it's
That's happening, yep.
So,
yeah, I can ask, and that's something I can take back to the sturgeon team, and they could reconsider adding that in if we move it to an actual question.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay, thank you, Justine.
Thank you.
Move on to item 6B, results of input on the 2024 Wildlife Management Spring Hearing Agenda of Advisory Questions. Scott Carroll, Wildlife Regulation Policy Specialist. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Stephen Little, and members of the board. I am Scott Carroll, Wildlife Regulation Policy Specialist. I'm here today to talk about the results of wildlife's slate of advisory questions that was on the spring hearing agenda in April. So as Justine mentioned, all of our questions again were advisory this year. We had 5 questions. 3 of them would have required legislation, and a little bit different from fisheries is Fisheries has more county-based or local-based questions. Ours are more broader and statewide, so we don't have the level of like local scrutiny that we would of the results, unless there was a county-based question that Justine may have. For our next steps, we're looking at, we have a fall rules meeting that we set up, involving a variety of the Conservation Congress will be there, Customer Outreach Service, Public Resource Protection, that will come and we'll talk about potential rule proposals for the next rule cycle, which will be 25 to 26, and will include the results of the questions that we had on this agenda. So with that, I'll go into the results of the questions. And just overall, I felt like we had strong support. I think our lowest supported question received 55% support, and that was question 11. The rest of them were all in the mid to lower 70%, which was, in my opinion, pretty good, better than I expected. So the question 1, just to recap, since it's been a while since we brought these questions last to you and earlier this year, but question 11 would have been, or sorry, question 8, we're looking at potentially allowing some hunters to allow deer parts to be left in the field after harvest. This would be similar to rules out west about where, when individuals allowed to quarter deer, they can leave the non-edible parts in the field and just take out the things they want to make it a little easier to, when they're hunting deeper in public lands, so they don't have to carry out a 100-pound deer out with them. Question 9 would be to create 2 woodcock zones. These are a migratory bird, so we'd have to, touch base with the federal government about this, since the Migratory Bird Treaty Act would apply. And what we have found out is that while we've been asking this question, that creating 2 woodcock zones may result in us actually losing a length of the season in the zone. So that probably will impact whether or not we move forward with it. I think we'd be very hesitant to reduce the length of the season to create 2 woodcock zones. But we're still kind of having those conversations with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about this question. Question 10, extend the fall turkey seasons in zones 6 and 7. Those are our 2 northern turkey zones. And what we've done is historically, we've ended that season right around the start of the 9-day gun deer season, where the rest of the fall turkey seasons in the southern zones last until this Sunday, like nearest January 6th. And what we've found is that the populations are doing quite well. So we're potentially just creating a single statewide season that would run, so it'd just be 1 season versus 2 separate seasons, depending on the zone. And then the last 2 questions were questions we thought were important to kind of gauge the public input on, but they would require legislation in order to change. First one is to remove landowner preference for the spring turkey drawing. That one got the lowest support, that was, but still 55%. And then 12, to have a single raccoon hunting season starting date. Currently, state law requires that for a raccoon hunting season, you have the residents get 2 weeks earlier start than non-residents, and really we didn't see a biological need for that, so we posed the question, and it was supported by 74% of the people providing input. So like I said, we'll come back and we'll talk about questions 9 through 11, or 9 through 10, or sorry, 8 through 10 this fall in our larger rule group. Questions 11 and 12, we kind of leave it up to the legislature. We did have one contact about these, so we just provided from a legislator to provide some information just about the results and some background about the question, but we won't typically be going out and advocating hard. We just like to gauge where the public is on some of these statutory issues. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Any questions from the board? Very clear. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, information item 6C, 2024 Wisconsin Conservation Congress Spring Hearing Advisory Question Summary and Convention Report. Rob Bowman, welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and Natural Resource Board members. It's a pleasure to come before the board today as chair of the Wisconsin Conservation Congress and to have this opportunity to review the business conducted by the Congress at our annual convention. I'd like to first thank Chair Smith for his presentation at our convention and the attendance of board member Marcy West. Speaking on behalf of our delegates, it was a privilege to have you both attend our convention and interact with our delegates. Your involvement and presence at our convention demonstrates the commitment to the role the Congress plays as an advisory body to the Natural Resources Board. Wisconsin Conservation Congress convened for its 90th annual convention on May 9th, 10th, and 11th in Appleton. Our statewide delegation voted on the DNR advisory questions and each of the proposed Congress advisory questions from 2024 spring hearing online questionnaire. And I'd like to briefly review that with you here today. There were 37 advisory proposals, Congress advisory proposals presented for the public comment at this year's spring hearings. We're advancing 31 of those advisory proposals to the Natural Resources Board and the Department and the Legislature for consideration as potential future rule changes or legislation. Among the suggested changes supported by the WCC are making it illegal to use submerged artificial light sources for the intent of attracting and schooling fish and other aquatic life, establishing a daily bag limit for white bass, include educational material on lead alternatives in all hunter education courses and hunting and fishing regulation material, and the establishment of a special regulations that would protect the brook trout population on 6 Mile Branch in Grant County. In addition, the delegation affirmed the assignment of 80 of the 2024 citizen resolutions to the WCC's advisory committees for their review this upcoming year. The delegation reviewed and registered their support for all but 3 of the DNR advisory questions. They did not support DNR question 4, which allowed trolling with 3 lines per angler on all inland waters of Wisconsin. Question 11, removing the landowner preference category for the spring turkey drawing. And question 12, creating a single raccoon hunting season start date for both resident and non-residents. The WCC reconsidered question 10 from last year's questionnaire, implementing a standard season structure statewide for muskie, with opening day of the harvest season beginning the first Saturday in May and extended to December 31st and open waters only. And the delegation supported it this year. This is the 12th year that we had a Youth Conservation Congress, and 15 youth delegates were able to attend and participate in portions of the convention and the youth events arranged specifically for them. YCC coordinator Kyle Zenz has been working with the program since 2019, and she continues to do an outstanding job with our youth delegates. The kids were able to trap shoot archery, and fish on Thursday evening. They toured the paper mill on Friday, and they were able to sit in on great presentations by department staff as well. We handed out years of service certificates and pins for those delegates who served the Congress for 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 years. Additionally, we acknowledge the work of those active and former delegates who have passed away during this last year through memorial resolutions. The Congress recognized DNR employees and citizens for their fantastic work in conservation. Our outstanding DNR professional award this year went to Kari Lee Zimmerman, who has been our liaison since 2010. Warden Zach Seitz received the Waterfowl Officer of the Year by our WCC Migratory Committee. The 2023 Local Conservation Organization of the Year went to the Riverside Hunting and Fishing Club of Fond du Lac County. The 2023 Conservation Educator of the Year went to Ryan and Jessica Peterson of Calumet County. The WCC's Dave A. Ladd Delegate of the Year award went to Mary Susan Diedrich from Waukesha County. And the WCC also inducted our very first chair, Dr. Hugo Schneiders, formerly of Wausau, and Ron Antone, formerly of Racine, into the Conservation Congress Hall of Fame. On May 10th, the delegates from our 11 districts elected the 2024 and 25 district leadership councils, and I'd like to thank each of the councilors from 2023 to 2024 that will not be returning this year as councilors, and congratulate those that were elected or re-elected for this upcoming year. This year's district leadership council is listed as part of the green sheet for your information. Our 2024-25 executive committee is as follows: Terry Rarig from Buffalo County and Eugene Altwies from Kenosha County are at-large members. Reed Kowalski, Manitowoc County, is our secretary. Paul Wraith from Dane County is our vice chair, and I was honored to be re-elected to serve another term as chair. In closing, I want to thank you for last night's dinner and the hospitality that we were met with. Our district leadership council values its relationship with the board, and we look forward to collaborating closely with you this upcoming year on all important natural resource management issues. Thank you again for your continued support.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions from the board? Robin?
I don't have a question, but I just want to really thank you for your vision in terms of the youth conservation efforts that you have. I think that's really the future, and I appreciate the fact that you had such a successful organization and successful activities this year for the youth. So
Well,
thank
the
you.
YCC initiative was started from the board. So Preston Cole was a board member back in 2007, I believe. They wrote the resolution to establish that. Our problem now is funding, of course, and we're
Okay.
trying to work on that this next year.
Well, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Doug?
Thanks, Chair. First, congratulations, Rob, on your reelection. So, the resolutions, you said 80 of how many? You have that?
We had 80 resolutions submitted by citizens this last year.
So 80 were submitted.
It was like 90, but about 10 of them were rejected within their county.
So the presentation we had from the public here a bit ago was on rights of nature. Was that one of the resolutions?
I'd have to look at all the
I
resolutions.
don't know. She said that resolution didn't make it or it made it.
Well, if it didn't make it, it was rejected at the county that it was presented in.
Okay. All right, I was curious. Thanks.
Other questions, comments?
Very good.
And again, Rob, thanks again for the dinner and the social event and the team building last night. I thought it was a very, very appropriate and a very productive evening.
We're trying.
We are too, thank you. Okay, item D has been postponed to a later meeting. I would like to say that we got a number of written comments. People aren't allowed to provide testimony on the informational items, but we did receive in writing comments from a number of people. Public expectations are there, and hopefully we can schedule that item as soon as possible and get her back on the agenda. Okay, Department Secretaries Matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few retirement recognitions for the good of the order. The first is Mr. Frederick Peters from our Public Safety and Resource Protection Division, 24 years of service. Second, Kimberly Curry with our Customer and Outreach Services Program, 37 years of service. I request motion to approve these recognitions.
I move that the recommendations be approved. Recognitions.
Got a motion to approve?
I'll
Is there a
second.
We have a second from Patty. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, Doug, go ahead.
Just thank them for their service and congratulate them on their retirement.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Next, regarding real estate transactions, are there any questions on the real estate transactions? Hearing none. Department Secretaries Matters. I just want to say publicly, once again, thank you to the City of Green Bay. Thank you to the Oneida Nation. And thank you to our staff for providing a great few days in the Green Bay area. Safe travels to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in August up at Turtle Lake.
Turtle Lake.
Mr. Chair, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Board members matters. Paul Burr.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to express my thanks for a great day yesterday to the United Nation and the City of Green Bay and staff. Appreciate it very much. It was an enriching experience. Thank you.
Eddie Schockner.
I also would like to thank the City of Green Bay and the nation for, it was just a phenomenal. I feel smarter. I woke up smarter. this morning. I would like to know more from the enforcement part of the DNR, some sort of, I don't know if they keep track or whatever, but from the warden's perspective of emergency services, how busy are they in water rescue, search and rescue, ATV accidents, that type of stuff. What does that look like? That's my background, and we don't talk about it a lot, and I really would like to see what it is that's going on out there. I heard something yesterday about missing paddle boards and how that impacts budgets and everything on what's going on, because we don't identify paddle boards, we don't identify kayaks and canoes. So when one comes up empty, it's like an all-out mission. So I just would like to know what that looks like in the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Doug?
Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry I missed the tour yesterday. It sounded like it went very well, and thanks to Oneida Nation. Wish I'd have made it. I missed being smarter.
Well, let me trample all over that, Doug, and recognize you for making a special effort to get here today. Doug suffered some storm damage up near Kashina yesterday, night before, and I think you had to chainsaw your way out of your driveway. If I got it right. So it was a stretch to get here today, and just appreciate the extra effort. I'm glad nobody was injured in the storm.
Yep. And thanks, Stephen caught me before the meeting, had reached out. He said, let the governor's office know about the situation, and we'll look for some reach out back from them. I'm certain our emergency management folks will be hearing something soon. That the assessment probably isn't done yet, judging from the scope of it and the amount of timber that's down there. Still, that's going to take a couple of weeks at least to get a volume, but we know this morning preliminarily it's well over 1 million board feet of timber that's laying down, and that'll probably grow exponentially here over the next couple of weeks. So my other one is, and during the tour, I know you've heard a bit about lake sturgeon management in the Winnebago system. And over the years, there's been talk about the Wolf River system, and tribal nations have been involved in that. There's been a push for passage that's been a difficult task, particularly for Menominee. We're interested in fish passage, and it's just a difficult task that's been undertaken in relation to cooperation. There's a Wolf River Resource Management Plan that was developed about 8 years ago now, maybe less. I really think that plan needs to be revisited, and it's a Wisconsin plan, so I think that plan needs to be revisited and needs to have specific language about passage on the Wolf River system in that plan, because it lacks it now. And it's a need. As you heard yesterday, I believe that the amazing work that's been done on Lake Sturgeon in the system goes as far as Shawano, and that's as far as it goes. That there are agreements and there are trucking of fish, but that falls short of the natural movement that should be occurring in that whole system. So just wanted to put that in front of everybody, which is know where that is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Deb?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Again, yesterday was outstanding, not just because of the city of Green Bay and the Oneida Nation, but I was in the group that asked probably more questions than anybody at New Waters. And I'm smarter, not just because of the DNR and the people in New Waters, but the people on this board that ask fabulous questions that I don't know to ask, quite honestly. So I appreciate that. Also, just briefly, I have had a meeting with Senator Felskowski, one-on-one, that she asked me some very pointed and direct questions. It was a very interesting meeting, but it ended with her saying she was going to support me in a confirmation. So Calvin and Zach were with me. It was quite interesting. But again, this board, I really appreciated the director of New Waters making the comments he did about the DNR yesterday. I wish everybody could hear that, because it was exactly what I think we all believe in our heart. So thank you for yesterday. It was great.
Thank you, Deb. Robin?
So ditto to what everybody has said about the efforts and work done to have us have such a wonderful couple of days here in the Green Bay area. I also wanted to just note that on Saturday, I attended the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge's 100-year celebration and learned some interesting things. I did not realize that it was formed as a result of citizen petitioning Congress, especially spearheaded by Will Digg, who was the founder of the Isaac Walton League. And that citizen petition resulted in a national refuge that is 261 miles of river. It goes from Wabasha to Rock Island, Illinois. 240,000 acres of Mississippi River floodplains are protected. 50% of the world's canvasback ducks go through that flyway. 306 species of birds, 119 species of fish, and 42 species of freshwater mussels. It's an enormous resource. And what was really heartening to me at this event was the participation by so many partners. So Ducks Unlimited, the Minnesota DNR, Wisconsin DNR, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the pollinators. I mean, there were just a plethora of groups who work together to protect that important resource for our state and the other states that are adjacent. So it was, it's a great resource. And if you haven't been out to visit it, I highly encourage you all. The visitor center is just beautiful, and it's just amazing resource for us in other states. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Marcy?
Awesome. Thank you. And I just want to add on the Green Bay visit. People got sick of it yesterday, but as my hometown, Green Bay Southwest, you know, it's just amazing to come back to a place and look at the change that has happened. We talked about it with others who live here that in the 70s, you would never have been catching fish out of the Fox River, and you would not have been seeing the bird life that we saw in the wetlands out near the bay. So I just want to emphasize that, you know, things take a long time, but putting the right policies in place and technology and the partnerships that we heard about from the Village of Howard, the county, Ducks Unlimited, I'm probably forgetting someone, but the department, land conservation departments, the coastal zone management, you know, we look to the long term, and that's the kind of stuff that you just love to see. So very proud to have those visits, and I learned a lot as well. So it was great. On my board member matter, I just, you know, obviously the June discussion is always difficult. I feel for the CDACs, and in 2021, my first year on the board, we talked about revisiting the CDAC process and what the recommendations are and where their flexibility is and things like that. Now we have a few with significant vacancies. So I hope as we go forward with the deer management that we can include that in the discussion, that we open that up and say, okay, we've learned a lot. Now where can we make it better? So thank you.
Thanks, Marcy. I also benefited a lot from the tour yesterday, and I think the one thing I would add to all the wonderful comments people have made, that progress, Marcy, that you've seen from growing up here to what we saw yesterday, it was not only a result of a lot of partnerships, but they emphasized it was a result of many, many, many projects and steps. Like in the hundreds, City of Howard had gotten grants, they've done little improvements here, little improvements there. It just speaks to having the wide and long-term vision of where you want to go and taking advantage of small opportunities along the way, and the results add up. And it was just a fabulous message of vision and determination and a lot of collaboration. And I'd encourage other communities and other people to learn from that, and don't give up. You know, sometimes you get turned down for grants or things don't turn out right, but take the next step. a wonderful journey, and they showed us that they've come a long, long way. Beautiful area. I'd like to mention too that earlier this month, I was able to attend, Marcy was there and Robin stopped in, the Partners Event, which is an annual gathering sponsored by the Fish and Wildlife Service, by Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and the intention is to get the partners together that are involved in cooperating in management of conservation issues, particularly in northern Wisconsin. It was so successful in the early years, it has grown to really open the doors to the whole width and breadth of state government, and many other tribal representatives take the opportunity of being there. But it was a very positive event. Another rainy day in June, a very wet, soggy, rainy day. But people went out and celebrated together, caught fish, had a meal together, and really maintained good, positive working relationships. And it's just nice to go to that and just to see the mutual respect that's developed amongst the people that need to work together on these important issues. So I just wanted to put in a pitch for that, and if board members have a chance to attend that sometime in the future, I'd encourage it. Marcy, you may want to add something.
I didn't catch enough fish.
Change your bait. Okay, with that, any more? I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All moves adjournment. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Patty. Any discussion? I'll make one comment to add to what Stephen said. August 13th and 14th were scheduled for Polk County, the official board meeting at Turtle Lake, and the tour day will look at resource issues in that area. And we're looking for very special advice from Patty, being in your neighborhood.
Oh, you're gonna leave smarter.
That's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you all.